Sigh, it looks like Boss Mag really has gone on a long trip this time. I've been waiting at the entrance of the restaurant for an entire day, but I didn't even catch a simple glimpse of Boss Mag and little Amy. Even though Boss Mag wrote a hiatus slip, I still feel so angry. If I were his boss, I definitely wouldn't allow him to take any breaks. 5 whole days. My God, will I be able to survive until Boss Mag gets back? How about you put down that biscuit before you say that? At the entrance of Mamie restaurant, there were a few customers looking at the hiatus slip plastered to the door, and all of them wore expressions of dejection and disappointment. Let's all go back for now, everyone. Boss Mag never goes back on his word, so even if he comes back on the 4th day, he'll definitely only open his restaurant again on the 5th day. I'm going to get an ice cream from the ice cream shop to soothe my wounded soul. Harrison climbed onto a horse-drawn carriage with his hand clasped over his heart and a hurt expression on his face. What do we do now, boss? Boss Mag isn't home, looks like we won't be able to eat our holy Rugiemo. Mond was carrying a large rucksack as he turned to Sargeras with a concerned expression. All of the other lava demons also wore similar expressions on their faces. Sargeras looked at the closed restaurant, and rubbed his large bald head as he loudly said, "We have to understand that Boss Mag can't always be around to cook for us. The 3rd group of warriors from our lava demon race is about to arrive in a few days, so we should take this opportunity to save up some money, then welcome them with the most delicious Rugiemos." "Then, what are we going to eat tonight?" Keel asked. Sargeras thought about this for a moment before waving his hand as he announced, "Come on, let's go eat some chicken." Within a large force in the Aiden Square, a series of well-built dwarves were striking red-hot weapons before them with their hammers over and over again, creating a loud commotion amid the scorching temperature. Cyril had 2 cotton balls stuck in his ears, and was taking a nap while resting his head on the table in the neighboring room, completely unaffected by the commotion in the forge. Right at this moment, a young butler quickly strode into the room. He wore an excited look on his face as he said, "Young master, we've received news that Blue Suede has been unable to sell even a single item of clothing, and aside from the employees they have to clean up their storage room, they hired a dozen or so tailors at the same time to produce more clothes. Those tailors are all being paid double wages as well. Just their daily wages are a massive expenditure for the shop, and Blue Suede is incurring even greater losses now." "What?" Cyril immediately plucked the cotton balls out of his ears and rose to his feet. The excited butler continued, "Blue Suede is still incurring losses at this point, but ever since you came to manage the forge, we've already received 2 large orders. As long as we can get those orders done in time, even after deducting wage costs, we'd still be able to earn at least 1 million copper coins of profit. We'll definitely be able to beat Blue Suede in a profit contest." "Yes." Cyril clapped his hands together, and began to pace around the room with an excited expression as he murmured to himself, "Let me see how you are going to compete with me, Gloria. The Moreton family is mine, and it'll always be mine. When I take over as the family leader, I'm going to kick you and your entire family out of Moreton Manor." Mag felt like there was no way that he would be able to become a saint, as he simply lacked the required inherent qualities. For example, in the face of this man, who was insulting him a second ago, but was now sucking up to him and asking him to teach him how to cook fish, Mag simply couldn't find it in himself to forgive this man and bestow upon him his cooking knowledge. As such, he was feeling a lot better at the sight of the enraged expression returning to Matthew's face. Matthew's face had turned as red as a tomato again, and was glaring at Mag with trembling fists. He had already completely swallowed his pride to try and learn from Mag, only to be rejected and insulted in return. He was so close. If Mag could reveal his secrets to him, he was sure that he would be able to cook an even more delicious fish than Mag could, and make the second prince fall in love with his fish again. Mag wore a smile on his face as he looked at the furious Matthew, and said, "Sorry, I don't take old and talentless disciples. If you don't mind, please step away from the table so my daughter and I can enjoy our meal in peace." Matthew gritted his teeth as he harumphed coldly. Humph! Don't underestimate an old man like me. I'm going to make a 3-year deal with you right here. 3 years later, you and I will have a cooking contest here in Rodu, and we'll both cook our best fish dishes to see which of us is the better chef. Mag massaged his glabella with a speechless expression, and said, Don't flatter yourself, 3 years later, I will have forgotten about someone like you long ago. I. Matthew's face had turned an even deeper shade of red, and it appeared as if he were about to breathe fire. Mag looked at him with a serious expression, and said, I still advise you to switch to cooking chicken. Look at you right now, you look so much like a fire chicken. Maybe you're fated to cook chicken. 3 years later, I'll be waiting for you to come and challenge me at Rodu. If you don't come, I tell everyone that my chicken. Tui, no, my fish is better than yours. Matthew turned and left in a fit of rage. I'm serious, cooking chicken would be perfect for you. Mag called out toward Matthew's departing figure. Matthew had just made his way over to the entrance of the dining hall, and he almost fell over upon hearing this. He only managed to prevent himself from stumbling after grabbing onto the doorframe for support, and then departed with a furious and resentful expression on his face. Everyone else in the dining hall was also looking at Mag with antagonism on their faces. This man from Chaos City was simply far too abhorrent. How could he humiliate Matthew like this? In the face of a common enemy, all of the chefs had united, and were preparing to retaliate at any moment. However, after Matthew left, Mag had lost all interest in the other chefs in the dining hall. After enjoying a delicious meal with Amy, he asked the servants to carry all of his stuff back into a secure room, and then followed them to the place where he and Amy were staying for the night. He was preparing to use these things when cooking for the king during his birthday banquet, and after his ostentatious performance today, he couldn't guarantee that there wouldn't be anyone who tried to tinker with his things in order to screw him over. He wasn't prepared to lose his life in this place, so it was naturally best to be more careful. In some bushes outside Mamie restaurant, a black-robed figure turned to Seuss, and said, Team leader, according to our investigation, the owner of the restaurant is around 30 years old, and came to Chaos City roughly 3 years ago. He also has a half-elf daughter who's around 4.5 years old. He's the one likeliest candidate we've found to be Alex. Where is he? Seuss's grip tightened around his wand, which was obscured up his sleeve. Apparently, this restaurant's owner and his daughter have gone to Rodil with Ambassador Kairals this morning. It seems that this also has something to do with His Highness, the second prince, as well, the black-robed man replied. They went to Rodu. A hint of surprise appeared on Seuss's face. After a brief silence, he shook his head, and said, I'll be reporting this matter to His Highness. Make sure to keep a close eye on this restaurant, and if anything happens here, report to me immediately. In the wind forest, beneath the bright moon, the sound of a flute rang out. A snowy white deer galloped out from within the forest, and a pair of translucent wings of light appeared on its back. As it rose into the air, a river of stars appeared beneath its feet. An exquisitely beautiful woman was sitting on the deer's back, and she disappeared into the distance in the blink of an eye. On the first night in Rodu, Mag had initially thought that his sensitivity would result in insomnia, but he managed to fall asleep as soon as his head came into contact with his pillow, and he was only woken up the morning after by a burst of knocking to the door. After getting dressed, he opened the door, and found that the man standing outside was the butler who had guided them the day before, Kaido. He was not a very powerful man, and was only responsible for trivial matters in the palace, such as guiding guests and things of that nature. In the context of the second prince's manor, Mag was naturally quite insignificant as well. Even though he was going to cook for the king during his birthday banquet the next day, in Josh's eyes, he was still nothing more than an exceptional chef. Did you sleep well, Mr. Mag? Kaido asked with a smile. He had heard about everything that had happened the day before, and it appeared that the second prince had been very pleased with Mag's cooking. As such, he was going to cook for the king on his birthday, and had won the second prince's favor. I slept very well, thank you for asking. Mag nodded with a smile. He glanced at the time, only to find that it was only just past 6 in the morning. He was wondering why he had been roused so early. Kaido could see the confusion in Mag's eyes, and hurriedly explained, Mr. Mag, His Highness informed us that he would like to have your steak and braised chicken and rice for breakfast, which is why I was sent to come and find you at such an early hour. I see. Please wait for a moment, I'll go speak to my daughter, then follow you to the kitchen. Mag nodded with a smile. This second prince sure was an annoying man. After entering the room, Amy turned to him with a pair of bleary eyes. Mag made his way over to her with a smile on his face, and said, Amy, I'm going to be cooking for a while. If you wake up before I get back, then just wait for me here, and when I come back, we'll have breakfast together. All right. Amy nodded and rolled over, encircling her arms around Ugly Duckling, which Mag had just picked up from the ground, and fell asleep again. As Mag followed Kaido to the kitchen, he asked, His Highness only specified that he would like some steak and braised chicken and rice. That's right. His Highness told me in person yesterday that he would only like some steak and braised chicken and rice. Kaido nodded with a smile, and said, Your cooking skills must really be quite exceptional, Mr. Mag. I've never seen His Highness request specific dishes from any chef before. It's a pity that he doesn't want some spicy grilled fish, Mag said with a forlorn expression. Hey! Kaido didn't understand what Mag was talking about. Mag didn't elaborate on this issue, either. He changed the subject, asking Kaido some questions about the situation in the second prince's manor. In Kaido's mind, he was already certain that Mag was going to remain at the second prince's manor and was almost definitely going to become the most prized chef in the manor's kitchen, so he naturally revealed everything that Mag wanted to hear without any suspicions. After cooking a portion of steak and braised chicken and rice each for Josh while repressing the urge to poison the food, Mag made some breakfast for himself, Amy, and Ugly Duckling. He then packed it up into containers and carried them back to the small courtyard that they were staying in. However, his expression faltered as soon as he walked into the door. In the room, a white-robed Krasu was sitting across from Amy in front of the table, while Ugly Duckling was still napping in Amy's arms. Master Krasu, what brings you here? Mag entered the room with a hint of surprise on his face. Krasu immediately grabbed the containers with food from Mag, and said, In order to enjoy the breakfast cooked by you today, I had to set off late last night. But this is the second prince's manor, I can even enter the royal palace whenever I want, let alone this prince's manor. Krasu placed a portion of steak on the table in front of him before placing the other portion in front of Amy. He nodded with a content expression before turning his attention to the 2 portions of braised chicken and rice, upon which a slightly disappointed look appeared on his face as he asked, Why is there no Yongzhou fried rice? Shouldn't we be eating something lighter in flavor for breakfast? Mag smiled as he handed over a knife and fork to Krasu, and he explained, Yongzhou fried rice requires too many ingredients. This isn't Mamie restaurant, after all, and the ingredients are rather limited, so you'll have to make do with just steak for now. He then placed a portion of braised chicken and rice in front of Amy, keeping another portion for himself, and placing a small portion on the ground for Ugly Duckling. That won't do. We're doing something very important today, so I have to eat a big breakfast. Krasu grabbed Ugly Duckling's braised chicken and rice as he spoke, and scooped a spoonful into his mouth as he nodded with approval. Delicious! Meow! Ugly Duckling turned to Krasu with a pitiable expression, then turned its gaze toward Amy, and there were already tears swimming in its eyes. All right, I'll make sure to save some for you. Amy patted Ugly Duckling's head before continuing to enjoy her breakfast. Meow! Ugly Duckling was immediately elated again as it stared up at Amy while she ate. Mag could only shake his head with a resigned expression at the sight of Krasu stealing Ugly Duckling's food before he sat down to enjoy his own meal. He was also rather skeptical whether Amy would actually remember to save some food for Ugly Duckling. 15 minutes later, Amy looked down at her spotless plate before turning to Ugly Duckling with an apologetic expression. "Ah! Ugly Duckling, I'm sorry, Father's food was simply too delicious, and I ate all of it without noticing." Meow! Ugly Duckling gave a feeble cry before sprawling onto Amy's leg. It didn't even have the strength to cry loudly anymore. Thankfully, Mag had predicted this situation in advance, and had saved some food for Ugly Duckling himself. He scooped out the small portion of leftover braised chicken and rice from his bowl into Ugly Duckling's plate, and smiled as he said, "Here you go." Meow. Ugly Duckling was immediately completely reinvigorated as it jumped down from Amy's legs. It then rubbed its little head affectionately against Mag's calf before digging into its meal. After finishing the final piece of steak on his plate, Krasoa put down the knife and fork in his hands, looking as if he hadn't had anywhere near enough. He turned to Mag, and asked, "I'm going to take Amy to the Magus Tower, would you like to come?" The Magus Tower. Magus Tower was rather surprised to hear this. Krasoa summoned a mirror, and then brought out a small blade as he began to shave down his unruly facial hair. "That's right. I left something there, and I have to go grab it. In the meantime, I'll bring my prized disciple with me to slap those old bastards in the face. My hands get itchy if I don't slap them regularly." "That sounds like fun. I've got nothing better to do anyway, so count me in," Mag said with a smile. There weren't many people in this world who would dare to speak about the Magus Tower in such a bullish manner other than Krasoa. "Are we slapping people? I love slapping people. Are we using our palms or are we using our fists?" Amy was also very excited. "Let's go there first. Once we get there, you can slap them however you want." Krasoa put away his small blade before rising to his feet. "Yay!" Amy picked up Ugly Duckling and tucked it under her arm before quickly following Krasoa out of the room. Ugly Duckling looked on with wide eyes that were filled with despair at the sight of the large piece of chicken left in the place. It had set that piece of chicken aside for last, but it wouldn't get to eat it now. Mag and the others had just walked out the door when Kaido appeared in their courtyard, and asked, "Where are you going, Mr. Mag?" "It's not every day that I get to come to Rodu, so I want to go out and see the city," Mag replied with a smile. He obviously couldn't tell Kaido that he was going to the Magus Tower to watch people getting slapped. "I see. His Highness was very pleased with the breakfast you prepared, and he wanted me to ask you if you'd like to go anywhere. If so, the manor will prepare a horse-drawn carriage for you." A smile appeared on Kaido's face as he said, "However, His Highness told me that he really enjoys your cooking, so he'd like you to prepare lunch for him today as well. As such, you'll have to get back before noon." Before Mag had a chance to reply, Krasoa pursed his lips, and interjected, "We'll be very busy at noon, so we won't be back before then. Go tell Josh that I'm going out with my disciple, and Boss Mag will be responsible for cooking for us. If he wants to eat something, tell him to go eat someone else's cooking. By the way, tell him that I'm Krasoa." Krasoa. Only then did Kaido notice the white-robed magic caster accompanying Mag and Amy. His eyes immediately widened, and he floundered momentarily before hurriedly nodding as he said, I'll be sure to pass on the message." There were very few people in the Roth Empire who hadn't heard of the legendary magic caster, Krasoa. He was the one who had founded the Magus Tower, and had been in charge of it for several decades. Even if the second prince were in his presence, he would have to extend a salute to Krasoa as disciples did to their masters. Who would have thought that he would suddenly appear in the second prince's manor, and that Mag's daughter would be his disciple? Krasoa was very pleased with Kaido's overawed reaction, and he waved a hand in a dismissive manner as he commanded, "Go prepare a horse-drawn carriage for us." "Yes, right away, Master Krasoa." Kaido was very relieved by the fact that he had been spared, and he immediately hurried away. The second prince had gone out earlier in the morning, but even if he were in the manor, he definitely wouldn't refuse a request for horse-drawn carriage issued by this legendary magic caster. Amy walked in a circle around Krasu with a curious expression, and asked, "Master Krasu, do you have a tiger glued to your face?" "No." "Then why is that uncle so scared of you?" Amy was still perplexed. Krasu gave a hearty laugh, and replied, "Power demands awe and respect. When you become as powerful as I am, even if you don't have tigers plastered to your face, everyone will still be scared of you." "I feel like it's still easier to glue tigers onto my face," Amy murmured with a sulky pout. "Meow," Ugly Duckling replied. "I wasn't talking about you." Amy pressed Ugly Duckling's raised head back down again. Kaidos quickly returned before leading Mag and the others to the front gate, where a large black horse-drawn carriage emblazoned with the crest of the second prince's manor was awaiting them. "Please board the carriage, Master Krasu." Kaido lifted the curtain on the carriage with a fawning smile. Krasu paid him no heed as he boarded the horse-drawn carriage. Mag carried Amy onto the carriage before turning to Kaido as he said, "Sorry to trouble you." "Not at all. It's an honor for me to serve Master Krasu," Kaido replied with a beaming smile. He had thought that Mag was trying to ride on the second prince's coattails, but who would have thought that he would have such a powerful backer already? Kaido had a brief word with the coach driver before the horse-drawn carriage slowly departed from the manor. Mag flipped open the small curtain on the side of the carriage and looked outside, only to find that they were on a street that was so wide 16 carriages could travel along it side by side. In modern times, this would be a 16-lane road. The entire street was paved with even and smooth dark green stone slabs, extending from the walls of the second prince's manor. There were lavish houses on either side of this road as well. This residential area was solely inhabited by high-ranking officials of the Roth Empire. No matter how rich a merchant was, they had no right to live here. The high walls of the royal palace could be seen not far away, and the grand buildings beyond the walls were shimmering with golden light under the morning sun, making it difficult for onlookers to stare directly at it without shielding their eyes. To the north of the royal palace, there was a grayish-black 9-story tower. The enormous tower stretched all the way up into the clouds, with each level measuring around 20 to 30 meters in height, and it appeared as if it were a silent guardian overseeing the royal palace. Many snippets of memories suddenly appeared from deep within Mag's memory. These were memories surrounding this grand city, the enormous Magus Tower, and the intense melee that had taken place during that rainy night 3 years ago. All of those details had become extremely clear to him, and he was able to recall every single face as well as their corresponding names. The Magus Tower had contributed significantly to that ambush over 3 years ago, but they certainly weren't idiots. They knew what catastrophic consequences would await them if the ambush were to end in failure and their involvement in it were revealed to the world. As such, among the higher UPS in the Magus Tower, only Elder Elliot participated directly in the ambush, but he had been wearing a mask the entire time, and refrained from unleashing even a single attack. When they met the day before, Josh appeared to be an amicable and benevolent prince. If Mag hadn't been aware of all of the dirty deeds the other party had committed in the past, he would have developed quite a positive impression of the second prince. Throughout the years, Josh had truly created quite an impressive facade for himself. Today, Mag was going to visit the Magus Tower, and if he could avoid having his cover blown there, then he wouldn't have to worry about his identity being exposed in the near future. In that case, he would be able to continue to focus on his cooking, as well as getting stronger. Amy had also caught sight of the Magus Tower, and an expectant look appeared on her face as she exclaimed, "What a tall pillar! Father, can we go play there?" Krasu's expression darkened, and a slightly awkward look appeared in his eyes as he corrected, "That's our destination for today. However, that's not a pillar, it's a tower, the Magus Tower, to be exact. I oversaw its entire construction process many years ago. It's quite a grand building, isn't it?" An enlightened look appeared on Amy's face as she nodded, and said, "Oh, so Master was the one who designed it. I was wondering what kind of normal person would put such a huge pillar there, but it all makes sense now." It's not a pillar, it's a tower. Krasu had been beset by a wave of rather complex emotions. Many years ago, it had been one of his most prized creations, and he had once thought himself to be an architect born into a magic caster's body. All right, it's a pillar that looks like a tower. Amy nodded. Sure, whatever you say. Krasu had been completely and utterly defeated. There was no way that he would be able to correct Amy in such matters. The horse-drawn carriage continued onward for about half an hour before stopping in the plaza outside the Magus Tower, upon which everyone disembarked from the carriage. Up close, the grand nature of the Magus Tower was made even more apparent. The enormous tower made with massive black stone blocks extended all the way into the sky, striking onlookers with a sense of perspective and reminding them just how insignificant they were. There were magic casters wearing robes emblazoned with the Magus Tower's crest entering and exiting the huge gates, which were over 10 meters tall, and it was impossible to find anywhere else with such a large gathering of magic casters. Master Krasu. Right at this moment, a young magic caster passed by Mag and the others before his footsteps suddenly faltered, and he turned to look at Krasu with a stunned expression. The young magic caster's words instantly drew a lot of attention from passers-by. Master Krasu. It really is Master Krasu. Didn't they say Master Krasu went to Chaos City? Why has he suddenly come here? And he's riding on a horse-drawn carriage from the second prince's manor. I also heard that he accepted a half-elf disciple. A while back, Hank and George both went to Chaos City to challenge Chaos School, and they were both defeated by that half-elf in the end. Really? Wait. You're not talking about that little half-elf girl beside Master Krasu, are you? She looks like she's only 3 or 4 years old. Hank's 4th-tier magic caster, how could he have been defeated by her? The Magus Tower had been founded by Krasu, and the moral code that had to be recited by all magic casters who entered the Magus Tower had also been written by Krasu. Even among the magic casters teaching magic in the Magus Tower, Master Krasu was the most talked about figure aside from President Richard. As such, it was very difficult for a magic caster of the Magus Tower not to have heard of Krasu, the founder of the Magus Tower, the #1 melee magic caster on the Norland continent, and the Lord of Fire. Legends surrounding Krasu were constantly circulating among magic casters, and topics involving melee magic versus long-range magic or fire-type magic casters versus ice-type magic casters were extremely popular subjects for debates. Krasu himself was known as a living fossil, and his feud with Urien was the stuff of legends in the magic world. A while back, news had spread of Krasu and Urien both accepting the same disciple, and almost no one believed it. The battle between fire and ice had been raging for close to a century, and the two of them were sworn enemies. How could they possibly have accepted the same disciple? However, this piece of astonishing news was soon verified to be true, and this confirmation had created a massive stir in the magic world. Many people were speculating about whether Krasu and Urien's teaching would give rise to a super prodigy, or if practicing conflicting fire and ice magic would ruin their disciple. After that, Krasu and Urien's disciple forged a resounding reputation for herself by defeating Hank and George in battle, stepping over the faces of those two Magus Tower prodigies, and becoming the next big thing in the magic world. From the time that Krasu and Urien had accepted this joint disciple, she had only been studying magic for just over a month before defeating the 4th-tier prodigy magic caster, Hank. She was undoubtedly a superb talent. All of the nearby magic casters bowed respectfully to Krasu, but all of their attention had been drawn to Amy. The widespread consensus was that she was very likely to surpass even Princess Irina in the future, and everyone wanted to see just what this supremely talented prodigy looked like. A female magic caster was looking at Amy with a hint of yearning in her eyes as she sighed. She's so adorable. Not only is she a prodigy, she's also so cute, just like Princess Irina as a child. I'm so envious. Another female magic caster wore a completely entranced smile as she chimed in, I know, right? I really want to hold her in my arms and pinch her little cheeks. They must be super soft. Don't even think about it, big sister. When I get angry, I'm super fierce. Amy hid her body behind Mag as she offered up Ugly Duckling with both hands, and said, if you really want to pinch something, then pinch Ugly Duckling. Oh, oh, that was the expression on Ugly Duckling's face. It seemed to be saying, who am I? Where am I? What are those terrifying women going to do to me? Even her kitten is so cute. The female magic caster's eyes lit up even further, and if it weren't for the fact that Krasu was standing right beside Amy, there was a good chance that they would have pounced on Amy. I'm scared. Amy hurriedly drew Ugly Duckling back into her arms and completely hid behind Mag, not daring to come out again. Mag also found these two female magic casters to be a little scary. He had thought that their trip to the Magus Tower would be a rather depressing one, but he hadn't expected all of the magic casters here to be so reverent to Krasu. Even though he knew that the Magus Tower was his enemy, he felt rather welcomed, and it was quite a peculiar feeling. Krasu was clearly also quite pleased with everyone's reactions to his arrival. He smiled and waved his hand as he said, all right, go back to what you were doing now. If you have the time to stand around, you have the time to practice your magic. All of the magic casters dispersed at Krasu's behest. Even though Krasu had no official disciples in the Magus Tower, all of the slightly older magic casters here had been instructed by him at some point, and they were the pillars of the Magus Tower. As such, no one dared to defy Krasu's orders. Only after everyone had left did Amy emerge from behind Mag. She looked up at both sides of Krasu's face, and asked, Master Krasu, I'm surprised everyone listened to you. Do you really not have any tigers stuck to your face? Krasu seemed to be very pleased with Amy's reaction. There was nothing that satisfied him more than being praised and admired by his prized disciple. After all, it was very difficult to earn a compliment from her. He stroked his beard with a smile as he said, there are more impressive things to come. Let's go in now. All right. Amy nodded as she skipped along behind Krasu with Ugly Duckling in her arms, following him into the Magus Tower. Mag tilted his back and looked up at the enormous Magus Tower. He could indistinctly make out a magic shield around the tower. It was supposed to be capable of withstanding 10th tier attacks. However, the Magus Tower hadn't been attacked for many years, so it was difficult to say whether this magic shield was still as effective as in the past. I wonder if this magic shield will hold up in the face of a sword strike from Mag Alex in his prime, Mag thought to himself in a curious manner. However, he quickly withdrew his gaze and walked into the Magus Tower behind Krasu. The two guards standing by the gates of the Magus Tower wore conflicted expressions on their faces. In particular, the leader of the guards was looking at the approaching Krasu, and his brows had almost completely knitted together. News of Krasu's withdrawal from the Magus Tower had been reported to all of the magic casters here. As such, Krasu technically wasn't a Magus Tower magic caster anymore, and no one could enter the Magus Tower unless they were a member of the Magus Tower or had received permission or an invitation in advance. But who would dare to stop Krasu? He was a man who had destroyed the Magus Tower on 2 separate occasions in his fits of rage, and he was the one who had founded the Magus Tower in the first place. Who would dare to bar him entry? The leader of the guards was a 6th tier magic caster, and he could immediately alert many 10th tier magic caster within the Magus Tower if the situation necessitated such an alarm to be raised. However, he would rather face a violent 10th tier giant dragon than face an enraged Krasu. He couldn't handle the blame for being responsible for the Magus Tower's 3rd demolition. Furthermore, even if he could alert 10th tier magic casters, as long as Krasu didn't display any animosity, who would attack him? But if he didn't stop Krasu and the higher UPS decided to hold him responsible, he would inevitably be punished for shirking his duty. After all, the bad blood between President Richard and Master Krasu wasn't exactly a secret. Within a short span of time, the guard leader's back was already completely drenched with cold sweat. Right at this moment, a slightly jaded voice sounded. Krasu, I didn't think that you would come back. A purple-robed man with a head of white hair and a black beard slowly emerged from within the Magus Tower. The guard lead heaved a long sigh of relief before standing off to the side. All of the magic casters turned toward the purple-robed magic caster in unison, and extended respectful bows as they said, "We pay our respects to President Richard." Richard was the leader of the Magus Tower Elder Panel, the president of Roth Empire's Magic Caster Guild, and also the current owner of the Magus Tower. The combination of those titles made him one of the most powerful men in the entire Roth Empire. Crasso was the founder of the Magus Tower, but Richard was the one who had elevated the status of all magic casters to the next level. He had made the Magus Tower one of the twin towers of the Roth Empire, taking it to a level where it was comparable to the Empire's army, and also significantly elevated the importance of magic casters in the entire Empire. Mag was appraising Richard through narrowed eyes. There was no way that this man would have been completely unrelated to the assassination attempt 3 years ago. Without his orders, the Magus Tower definitely wouldn't have deployed so many magic casters to hunt down Alex. Richard was quite a tall and broad man, and was clad in a set of purple robes on this occasion. His head of white hair was immaculately organized, but his beard was still as black as ink. He was standing at the entrance of the Magus Tower, looking at Crasso with a calm expression. There was no surprise or any other emotion on his face, it was as if he had anticipated Crasso's arrival far in advance. All of the magic casters gathered around the Magus Tower's entrance were also completely silent. No one dared to say anything, but no one departed from the scene, either. All of them were carefully appraising Crasso and Richard. The conflict between Crasso and Richard was not a secret to everyone in the Magus Tower. However, Crasso had played no role in the management of the Magus Tower in the past few years, and was more like the spiritual pillar of the Magus Tower. Even so, Crasso's announcement that he was withdrawing from the Magus Tower a month ago still came as a huge shock to everyone. At the same time, it worked to verify the notion that the conflict between Crasso and Richard had reached an irresolvable level. A month ago, Richard had sent the best young prodigies from the Magus Tower to Chaos City and issue a challenge to Crasso's disciple. In the end, they were all thoroughly defeated and humiliated. What was Crasso doing now by bringing his disciple to the Magus Tower? Crasso's title as the Lord of Fire certainly wasn't unwarranted. Even though he seemed to be a benevolent old man, he had destroyed the entire Magus Tower on more than one occasion, and his flaming temper completely belied his amicable appearance. As such, it certainly wasn't his style to refrain from retaliation after being provoked. On one side was the spiritual leader of the Magus Tower, while the current leader of the Magus Tower's panel of elders stood on the other side. The issue of which side everyone should take had become quite a troublesome predicament that was worthy of careful consideration. Obviously, no one else was going to actually step in, but it was important to clarify to themselves whom they were supporting in their hearts. Crasso's footsteps had also faltered, and he looked at Richard with a smile as he asked, "Am I not welcome here?" Richard's brows furrowed slightly as he replied, "If you want to come back, then you're certainly welcome to do so. However, you were the one who had announced that you were cutting all ties with the Magus Tower, so why have you come here today? I'm not a person who likes to owe other people favors. Seeing as you sent your young prodigies to offer me such a fantastic present, I naturally have to bring my prized disciple here to return the favor." Crasso began to make his way toward Richard, and everyone else reflexively dispersed off to either side. "Where's that fat bastard, Brent? I told him to come to Chaos City to accept his punishment from me in 10 days, looks like my words no longer hold any weight in his heart." Crasso looked around with a cold light in his eyes. "Crasso, you may be the founder of the Magus Tower, but you're no longer a member of our Magus Tower now. Cease your insolent display at once." Elliot stepped forward as he drew his wand, looking as if he were poised to attack. Crasso turned to Elliot with an amused smile, and taunted him. "Would you dare to attack me?" I. Elliot unconsciously took a backward step, but he drew courage from the sight of Richard, and forcibly composed himself as he said, "If you keep this up, then don't blame me for teaching you a lesson." Bam! Crasso was standing in front of Richard a moment ago, but he suddenly appeared in front of Elliot in the blink of an eye. Immediately thereafter, he raised his staff, which was even taller than himself, and swung it straight into Elliot's face, ramming him face first into the ground. "You want to teach me a lesson?" Krasuo asked with a cold smile on his face. "I." Elliot tightened his grip on his wound with a furious look on his face, and as he struggled to clamber to his feet, there was already magic converging toward the tip of his wand. Bam! Elliot had only managed to stand up halfway when he was bashed into the ground by Krasuo's staff again. Both sides of his face had completely swelled up to equal measure. "There, I made it even for you," Krasuo continued with a smile on his face. Elliot was still attempting to resist. Bam! 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 Ow! 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 Elliot's was on the verge of sobs as his howls rang out across the entire Magus Tower. "Master Krasuo is so powerful. Melee magic really is fearsome." "He sure is. I had heard that Master Krasuo's melee magic was virtually invincible, but I had never believed it to be true. Now, I'm totally convinced. I suddenly really want to learn melee magic, but there's almost no one in the Magus Tower that teaches melee magic. It's a real pity that Master Krasuo withdrew from our Magus Tower." All of the spectating magic casters looked on with wide eyes at the farcical scenes unfolding before their eyes. Elliot was one of the 5 elders of the Magus Tower, a powerful 10th tier great magic caster, yet he was completely powerless to retaliate in the face of Krasuo's unrelenting assault. As opposed to a 10th tier magic caster, he was more like a human sandbag at this moment. Even though he was holding his wand, there was no opportunity for him to cast any spells at all. Even the magic shield that he had conjured up was being torn apart as if it were a papier-mâché structure. Just the dull thumps of staff striking flesh were making the bystanders wince, and the howls of agony and humiliation that were escaping Elliot's mouth struck everyone with a twisted sense of satisfaction. Elliot was always strutting around with his chin raised, thinking himself to be better than everyone else, and it was almost pleasing to see him being stomped into the ground. "I see. If I want to have the most fun beating someone up, I have to use a staff." Amy stood off to the side and clapped her little hands together as she spurred Krasuo on, looking as if she had just learned a valuable lesson. Master Krasuo's temper really is just as fiery as it's rumored to be. Mag was quite flabbergasted. To think that Krasuo was violently assaulting a 10th tier elder of right in the Magus Tower, yet most of the magic casters were more interested in watching rather than stepping in to help Elliot. "That's enough!" Richard suddenly yelled as he raised his hand, conjuring up a water mirror in front of Elliot's face. Bam! The staff fell once again, shattering the magic mirror and striking Elliot in the face again. This time, Elliot was completely knocked out, and his face was so swollen that it resembled the head of a pig. "That's enough." Krasuo looked down at Elliot, and nodded as he said, "I think you may be right." The veins on Richard's forehead were bulging with fury as Richard spat through gritted teeth. "Krasuo, why have you come here today? Do you really want to make our Magus Tower your enemy?" "I told you, I'm here to return a favor. I was just about to offer my present to you, but Elliot stepped in first, so I gave him a taste of my present." Krasuo smiled before continuing in a loud voice, "I heard you took another disciple under your wing recently, and he broke the record for the fastest to reach the 5th level of the tower. My disciple is here today to challenge that record. How about we let them have a competition?" "Oi, you fat bastard, are you going to tell the truth or not? If you keep feeding me lies, I'm going to skin and cook you like a roast pig." In a dark room, a woman was holding a chair, which she swung viciously into the body of the fatso who knelt down before her. The chair was instantly pulverized by the force of the impact. The fatso cowered in the corner of the room with his arms shielding his head, and his voice trembled as he said, Please spare me, princess, I really don't know what you're talking about. The incident from 3 years ago really had nothing to do with our Magus Tower. Besides, this isn't how you cook roast pig. Oh? You still dare to talk back to me? If I say this is how roast pig is cooked, then this is how roast pig is cooked. Another chair somehow appeared in the woman's hands before being shattered against the fatso's body again. Elliot had been knocked unconscious, and even Richard was being threatened by Krasu. All of the magic casters gathered around the entrance had fallen completely silent, wondering what was going to happen next. At the core of the matter, Krasu was no longer a member of the Magus Tower, and he had clearly come here with the sole intention of humiliating the Magus Tower. In doing so, he would be humiliating all of the members of the Magus Tower in the process, and with that in mind, all of the magic casters were beginning to lean toward siding with Richard. Is Master Krasu proposing a tower ascending match between that little half-elf girl and Kola? Kola is the president's most prized young disciple, and he's already a 5th-tier magic caster at just 12 years old. He's being touted as the most brilliant prodigy in the history of the Magus Tower, and his target is none other than surpassing Princess Irina herself. Not only is Kola the youngest to reach the 5th level of the tower, he was also the fastest to do so among all 5th-tier magic casters who have achieved the same feat. This little girl has only been studying magic for 2 months, how would she possibly be able to scale the 5th level of the tower? All of the magic casters were discussing quietly among themselves. They had heard many rumors about Amy's prodigious talent, but in their eyes, there was no way that such an adorable little girl could scale the 5th level of the tower. Cultivating as a magic caster was not easy. There was a major hurdle once every 3 tiers, and many people were unable to become intermediate magic casters even after trying for their entire lives. Aside from the extremely talented prodigies, the minimum prerequisite for everyone else looking to join the Magus Tower was that they had to be a 4th-tier magic caster. Despite that, many magic casters were unable to reach the 5th tier even after joining the Magus Tower. Manifestation magic and ability endowment posed another 2 hurdles that impeded many people's progression. Only those with sufficient aptitude or willing to put in extensive amounts of hard work were able to get to that level. Kola had been cultivating for 6 years, and had mastered manifestation magic as well as ability endowment at the tender age of 12. His aptitude was far superior to even that of the likes of Hank and George, and he was already being referred to as the #1 young prodigy of the Magus Tower. If Amy had also mastered manifestation magic and ability endowment after just 2 months of studying magic, how astonishing would that be? Richard's expression was also quite strained after being threatened by Krasu in front of so many people, but he remained completely unflustered. He took a glance at Amy, and a cold smile appeared on his face as he said, "You've only been instructing her for 2 months, how is she going to be able to compete with my disciple?" "Hee, she'll beat up your disciple, just like she did with those little brats you sent to Chaos City." Krasu pursed his lips before pulling out a blue gemstone, and he smiled as he continued, "I'm willing to bet this water spirit jewel that my disciple will win. If she loses, you can have this jewel, but if your disciple loses, you have to give me that fire spirit lotus that you have." Richard's eyes immediately lit up at the sight of the water spirit jewel in Krasu's hand. He glanced at Krasu, then at Amy, and hesitated momentarily before nodding as he said, "You have yourself a deal." "Good." Krasu stowed away the water spirit jewel with a hint of a smug smile on his face. "Is Amy already a 5th-tier magic caster?" Mag was feeling quite befuddled. He had been quite busy with the matters surrounding the steam engine, so he hadn't been paying enough attention to Amy of late. Both the water spirit jewel and the fire spirit lotus were extremely valuable treasures to water-type and fire-type magic casters, respectively, capable of enhancing their spiritual power and magical mastery. Furthermore, the fire spirit lotus was rather special in that if a fire-type magic caster were to consume it, it would be possible for them to attain some sort of special ability. The ability was different depending on who consumed the lotus flower. Some were only able to master low-level fire-type magic, while others had been endowed with some fire-type abilities such as fire erosion and things of that nature. As such, this was undoubtedly a massive gamble. However, Mag certainly didn't believe that Krasu was an idiot. No one was more familiar with the state of the Magus Tower than he was, and there was no way that he would travel all this way to Rodu just to make a bet that he would have no chance of winning. Everyone entered the hall on the first floor of the Magus Tower, which was around the size of a soccer field and around 3 to 4 meters tall. News of the upcoming contest between Crassus and Richard's disciple soon spread throughout the entire Magus Tower, and many magic casters flocked to the first floor to witness this contest between prodigies. In a way, it was also a contest between Crassus and Richard, the former and current leaders of the Magus Tower. The tower ascending trial had been invented by Crassus to introduce competition among the magic casters of the Magus Tower. Not only could it assess a magic caster's power, the number of levels ascended and the speed at which those levels were ascended could determine a power hierarchy within the Magus Tower, thereby eliminating the need for round-robin matches. Crassus had always been of the opinion that a magic caster should always strive to improve. As long as one continued to better themselves relentlessly, there was no doubt that they would become an outstanding magic caster. Of course, if there was more competition, there would be more motivation to improve, and that was why he had championed the Tower Ascending Trial in the first place. The Tower Ascending Trial had been in place for several decades already, and it was constantly forcing magic casters to improve. If their performance during the trials were to deteriorate to a certain extent over time, and this deterioration wasn't due to any extraordinary circumstances, then they would be evicted from the Magus Tower. The fact that only magic casters who constantly improved could remain the Magus Tower ensured that it continued to be a holy land of the magic world. There were 9 levels of the Magus Tower in total, and each level presented a trial that could test the very limits of magic casters of the corresponding tier. The higher one ascended, the more difficult the trials became, so it naturally required progressively more time. "Master, may I ask what you've summoned me here for?" A white-robed young boy emerged from the crowd before cupping his fists in a salute toward Richard. "Kola, I would like you to compete in a tower ascending match with Crassus's disciple. Scale 5 levels of the tower at the fastest speed possible, and show them that our Magus Tower is not to be looked down on." "Yes." The calm and mature look on Kola's tender face belied his age, and there was a hint of disdain in his eyes as he looked at Amy. "Little Amy, it's your time to shine," Crassus said with a smile. "Master, is it my turn to beat people up now?" Amy was rubbing her little hands together with excitement as her gaze settled on Kola. "We're not beating him up yet, we're scaling the tower first." Crassus pointed toward a couple of open doors nearby with a smile, and said, "Once you get in there, climb to the 5th floor of the tower as quickly as possible." "All right then." Amy withdrew her little fists with a disappointed expression. It appeared that she wouldn't be able to beat Kola up for now. "Let's begin," Richard proposed in a calm manner. "Sure." Crassus nodded in a calm and collected manner. "Take care in there, Amy." Mag patted Amy's little head. A trial like this most likely wasn't very dangerous. Otherwise, there was no way that Crassus would Amy take this risk. "Yes, father, I'll be sure to win." Amy nodded obediently before handing Ugly Duckling over to Mag, and then made her way toward one of the open doors. Kola paused in front of his door and turned to Amy with a disdainful look as he whispered, "You had better look out in there, don't get full of yourself just because you beat those 2 idiots, George and Hank. They're no match for me, and I'm going to show you the gulf between you and a true prodigy like me." "You also think that Hank and George are idiots?" Amy exclaimed with a surprised expression. Kola's expression immediately stiffened. He had simply wanted to taunt Amy, but hadn't thought that she would suddenly yell in such a loud voice. George's and Richard's expressions both darkened upon hearing this. "Humph!" Kola harumphed coldly and clenched his fists as he strode into the door on the left. He was determined to emerge from the exit on the 5th level in half the time as this little brat did at most. Of course, she most likely wouldn't even make it to the 5th level at all. "Master Crassus told me to just punch everything I encounter in there, but won't that be unfair to Master Crassus?" Amy thought to herself as she entered through the door on the right. The heavy black metal gates slowly closed, and a minute timer appeared above the doors. There was also a surveillance system set up to inform everyone of the two contestants' progress. Surely there's no way that little half-elf girl will win. Kola managed to get to the 5th level half a year ago, and he's only been getting quicker and quicker in the past half a year. Not long ago, he set the record for the fastest to reach the 5th level. If he loses here, our Magus Tower's reputation would be completely swept to the ground. He'll win for sure. I feel like if that little girl was also 12 years old, she'd be able to easily crush Kola. Even though many people were feeling sympathetic toward Amy due to the age gap between her and Kola, they were still rooting for Kola to attain victory and uphold the dignity of the Magus Tower. Among the crowd, there was a tall and thin magic caster staring intently at the two black metal doors. A smile appeared on his face as he murmured to himself, "I've never seen a pure melee magic caster attempt the tower ascending trial. Perhaps she'll put on a good show. Looks like this one should be in the bag." Mag could see the nonchalant expression on Krasu's face, and he was feeling quite reassured. Everyone was looking at the countdown timer with rapt focus on their faces. Even though most of them were sure of the result already, they still couldn't remain completely calm before the actual conclusion of the contest. Even Richard was looking at the timer with a hint of anxiety in his eyes. 3, 2, 1, the countdown concluded, and a new timer was started as a layer of green light appeared over the surfaces of the black metal gates. 10 seconds. Kola only took 10 seconds to pass the first level. The number above Kola's door had already increased to 2, while Amy was still stuck on the first floor. Expressions of excitement appeared on all of the faces of the magic casters in Richard's faction. This was a good start. 20 seconds. Kola has passed the second level. 20 seconds had passed, and Kola had already reached the third floor, but Amy was still on the first floor. 30 seconds. Kola has passed the third level. Half a minute had gone by, and the number above Kola's door had already increased to 4. In contrast, there was no difference in number above Amy's door. There's such a massive gap between them. I wonder what gave Master Krasu the confidence to issue this challenge. At this rate, I reckon she'll still be stuck on the first level when Kola emerges from the 5th level. Could it be that melee magic casters are at a disadvantage when it comes to the tower ascending trial? The first level tests one's ability to evade elementary spells, the second level assesses one's spiritual power, the third level tests one's magic control, the fourth level tests one's proficiency in intermediate spells, and the fifth level tests one's ability to use manifestation magic and ability endowment in battle. All of these trials place melee magic casters at a severe disadvantage, so this was never fair from the start. The magic casters from Richard's faction were already preparing to celebrate. Meanwhile, the spectating magic casters were all rather disappointed. They had thought that this would be a heated and evenly matched contest, but it appeared that this was merely going to be a landslide victory for Kola. A smile had also appeared on Richard's face. He had been searching for a water spirit jewel for many years in order to help him recover from a chronic spiritual ailment. Never had he thought that Krasu would be the one to offer a water spirit jewel to him. Did she get lost in there? Krasu murmured to himself with his brows furrowed in confusion. Did she forget that there's more than one level? Mag was also feeling quite perplexed. Even though melee magic casters were at a disadvantage in the tower ascending trial, Amy had learned ice-type long-range magic from Urian, so there was no way that she wouldn't even be able to get past the first level. Can I start now? Amy extended her little hand and tapped the door before her with a confused expression. As soon as she made contact with the surface of the door, it vanished, and she appeared in another room. She thought to herself for a moment before patting her own head as she exclaimed, "Oh no! Master told me to climb the tower as quickly as possible." A pair of wind-fire wheels appeared beneath her feet as she disappeared on the spot. She finally passed the first level after 61 seconds, someone in the crowd exclaimed. The number above Amy's door had indeed changed from 1 to 2. However, even the most mundane 4th-tier magic casters in the Magus Tower could easily pass the first level in a faster time. Some of the magic casters were getting rather bored, and were already preparing to leave. She went up another level at 62 seconds. Everyone's eyes widened upon hearing this. They turned to the number above Amy's door, and then to the timer on the wall, to find that they were registering 3 and 62, respectively. She passed the second level in 1 second. How is that possible? The entire crowd erupted into an uproar as their jaws dropped to the ground. They felt as if the world had been tipped on its head. That's impossible. Richard was also in complete disbelief. How could a 4th-tier magic caster possibly be capable of passing the second level in 1 second? She passed the third level at 65 seconds. My God, am I dreaming right now? In the blink of an eye, Amy had scaled another level. Amy had climbed 3 levels in 5 seconds, and everyone was completely flabbergasted. All of the magic casters who were preparing to leave immediately faltered in their footsteps as they stared at the number above Amy's door, unable to believe their own eyes. It was almost impossible even for a 7th-tier magic caster to pass 3 levels in 5 seconds, but a 4-year-old little girl had achieved this next to impossible feat. She had passed the second level in 1 second and the third level in 3 seconds, so there was no way that it would have taken her 61 seconds to pass the first level. That could only mean that she had given Cola 60-second head start. That was a scathing insult. How could this be? Richard's face immediately paled upon seeing this. He had thought that the contest had already been decided, only for such an extraordinary turn of events to unfold. If Krasu's disciple could keep up this speed, then there was no way that Cola would be able to beat her. Meanwhile, Cola was still on the 4th floor, and all of the magic casters in Richard's faction were getting very nervous. If that little girl really did manage to beat Cola after giving him a 60-second head start, then that would be extremely humiliating. A short and portly magic caster chuckled coldly as he said, "The first 3 levels are too easy, but she won't be able to play any tricks on the 4th level. Without mastering powerful intermediate spells, there's no way that she would be able to beat the guardian magic beast on that level. Cola will be sure to emerge victorious." All of the magic casters nodded in agreement. This man was right. The trial on the 3rd level examined one's mastery over intermediate spells, and only those who were proficient in intermediate spells could quickly defeat the manifestation magic beast on that level. She passed the 4th level at 70 seconds. She only used 5 seconds to pass the 4th level. As soon as the fat magic caster finished his sentence, the number above Amy's door turned into a 5. The bright red 5 was like a slap to the face for that intermediate magic caster. His cheeks immediately became flushed with humiliation, and he lowered his head into his chest, wishing that the ground would swallow him up. This is beyond extraordinary. She's a freak. A freak, I tell you. Even though she gave Cola a 60-second head start, I have a feeling she's going to set a new record for the fastest to pass the 5th level. Is melee magic really this powerful? In that case, why won't the Magus Tower teach us melee magic? I really want to learn it. None of the magic casters present could remain calm any longer. They were the cream of the crop among all of the magic casters in the Roth Empire, but all of them were suddenly struck by a crushing sense of inferiority. As expected of my prized disciple, she's a spitting image of my younger self. Krasus stroked his beard with a beaming smile on his face. That's my daughter all right. Mag also wore an elated expression on his face. He was feeling very satisfied with the sight of the bewildered expressions on the faces of the magic casters around him, even more so than if he were to receive a direct compliment. Amy had passed 4 levels in merely 10 seconds, while Cola continued to grind away on the 4th floor. He was on track to break the record that he had set not long ago, but that record pace was more like a snail's pace in the face of Amy. Will she be able to pass the 5th level? I feel like that's already a given. I'm just interested in seeing how many seconds she would take to pass the 5th level. I have a feeling it's a record that's never going to be broken. Everyone was looking at Amy's door with anticipation and curiosity on their faces. The short and fat magic caster raised his head again, seemingly having recovered some confidence as he predicted. Only a magic caster who had mastered manifestation magic and ability endowment can pass the 5th level. She only just progressed to the 4th tier a month ago, so there's no way she could have mastered those types of magic already. On the 5th floor, within a cavernous desert space, Amy was holding her staff, which was several times taller than herself, as she looked into the distance with a thoughtful look on her face. Her gaze was aimed directly at a massive saber-toothed tiger that was close to 5 meters in length and over 2 meters tall. After a brief moment of contemplation, she shook her head, and murmured to herself, "No, I can't use only magic taught to me by Master Krasu. If I do that, Master Urian will be sad." Roar! The massive saber-toothed tiger glowered at Amy with a pair of red eyes as it let loose a thunderous roar of rage. It dug its forepaws into the ground before rushing directly toward Amy, sweeping up 4 sandstorms in its wake. The staff in Amy's hand transformed into a wand as she waved it toward the massive tiger in an unhurried manner. As she did so, a serious expression appeared on her little face, and she said, "Big Teeth Tiger, you have to make sure to be good. Otherwise, a fat cat will fall from the sky and squash you." However, the huge saber-toothed tiger clearly didn't understand what Amy was saying. It accelerated even further, and aside from the 4 sandstorms it had whipped up, there were also yellow blades of wind appearing beneath its paws. It seemed as if it would be able to easily crush a person under one of its massive powerful paws, and in the blink of an eye, it had reached a distance of less than 10 meters away from Amy. At such close proximity, Amy could even clearly see the saliva hanging from its long and menacing saber teeth. Right at this moment, a gargantuan shadow suddenly appeared over the saber-toothed tight. The massive tiger looked up, only to discover an astonishingly huge orange backside. Boom! A massive ball-shaped orange kitten over 5 meters in radius came crashing down from above, instantly crushing the oncoming saber-toothed tiger. The 4 sandstorms it had whipped up were also squashed as if they were nothing more than tiny flies. "I told you to be good, didn't I? See what you made me do." Amy heaved a faint sigh as her wind fire wheels flashed, and in the blink of an eye, she had already rushed out of the desert space through the opening that had appeared up ahead. The entire Magus Tower tremored slightly. "What's going on?" The magic casters on the 1st floor were slightly concerned as they felt the tremors run through the entirety of the Magus Tower. It must be Kola. He must be about to pass the 4th level. The short and fat magic caster seemed to be very confident in his judgment. Kola has passed the 4th stage at 80 seconds. All of the magic casters were elated upon seeing this. Not only was this a bet between Richard and Krasu, the honor of the entire Magus Tower was on the line. Furthermore, this was also a clash between long-range and melee magic, so this really was an extremely important contest. Kola had made it to the final level, so there was hope for him to attain victory. After all, he had far more experience in these trials than Amy did. However, almost at the exact same moment, an even louder announcement rang out. "Amy has passed the 5th level at 80 seconds. The entire 1st floor of the Magus Tower fell completely silent. Everyone was shocked beyond belief by what they were seeing. Within the cavernous space of the 5th floor, Kola looked at the magic beast up ahead with an excited expression as he murmured to himself, "It's only been 80 seconds, and I should be able to defeat this 5th tier manifestation magic beast within a minute. In that case, I'd be breaking my own record. When that time comes, that little brat will most likely still be struggling on the 2nd or 3rd floor." Amy emerged from the trial space on the 5th floor and appeared in a long corridor. There was a series of closed doors lining the sides of the corridor. "Where's the exit?" Amy was looking around for the way out when she suddenly heard the sound of something being broken in one of the nearby rooms, followed by a burst of anguished howling. "Is someone fighting in here?" Amy's eyes lit up as she gently pushed open the door. The door was slowly opened. Within the dimly lit room, there was a beautiful elf holding a chair in her hands, and she was just about to bring it crashing down onto the head of the fatso cowering in the corner. Amy's little hand was still on the door handle, and she looked on with her mouth slightly agape. She was completely rooted to the spot as if she had been immobilized by fear. Irina's chair faltered in its downward descent as she turned to look at Amy, and she was also rooted to the spot. The half-elf little girl at the entrance of the room appeared to be 3 to 4 years old, and she was wearing a gorgeous purple dress. Her silver hair had been arranged into twin braids, and she was looking at her with a pair of watery blue eyes, looking as if she were rather frightened. Her pointy little ears were twitching nervously, and her intricate little face epitomized the word SAHDR cable. Amy is probably around the same age as her. Irina spaced out for a second, but she quickly came to her senses, and stared at the little girl with a hint of surprise in her eyes. She had applied restricted magic to the door, so even a 9th-tier magic caster shouldn't have been able to open it from the outside. This little girl appeared to be a little magic caster, but there was no way that she should have been able to open the door. As soon as the door was opened, Brent's eyes immediately lit up as if a ray of hope had shone onto his miserable existence. However, his expression also stiffened at the sight of Amy standing at the entrance. "That's not President Richard. Who's this little half-elf girl? And what's she doing here?" Upon hearing the news that Krasu had come to cause trouble for the Magus Tower, Brent was in the process of hurrying down the stairs when he was knocked out by a vicious chair to the head from Irina. After that, she dragged him into this dark room, and gave him a brutal beating while interrogating him about who had been involved in the assassination attempt 3 years ago. Brent wasn't an idiot, he knew that he couldn't admit the Magus Tower's involvement in that incident. As such, he could only wait for Richard to detect the abnormal magic waves in the tower and then come to save him. However, instead of Richard rushing in to save him, he was greeted by the sight of this little half-elf girl. The Magus Tower only accepted human magic casters, so he had no idea how this little half-elf had snuck into the tower. However, she was his only hope, so he immediately yelled, "Hurry up and call for a thump." Before Brent had a chance to finish his sentence, a chair had slammed into his face. The chair was shattered into tiny wooden splinters, while Brent had been knocked completely unconscious. Irina tossed the remaining sections of the chair in her hands aside, then turned to Amy with a smile, and asked, "Who are you, little girl? How did you come here?" Amy's eyes were glittering as she looked at Irina. Big Sister Aisha was the most beautiful elf she had ever seen, but this rather violent Big Sister seemed to be even more beautiful, just as if she were a goddess who had descended from the heavens. Furthermore, she also had a head of silver hair, and her skin was fair as snow. Her pointy ears were so thin that they were almost transparent, and the golden moon insignia appeared as if it could glow. She also had a pair of watery blue eyes just like her own, and for some reason, Amy was struck by a sense of intimacy and closeness when she looked at this woman. However, the image of Irina slamming the chair into the fatso's head had well and truly startled Amy. Not only was this big sister so beautiful, she was also so cool. Was she a melee magic caster as well? If you're going to hit someone, hit them in the face was the first lesson in melee magic that Krasu had ever taught her. As such, Irina's treatment of that fatso was a textbook example of how melee magic should be implemented in battle. If it weren't for the fact that she knew that Master Krasu had no other disciples, she would have been tempted to call this woman her martial sister. "I'm just a little elf who happens to be passing by," Amy replied feebly. Even though she was feeling a sense of intimacy toward this big sister, she still implemented the strategy that Mag had taught her when speaking to strangers, which involved not disclosing any personal information. "A little elf who happens to be passing by, eh?" Irina faltered slightly before a smile appeared on her face. It had been a long time since she had met such an interesting little girl, and she couldn't help but chuckle. A smaller chair suddenly appeared in her hand, and she extended an invitation toward Amy as she asked, "This is a bad guy. Do you want to beat up this bad guy with me?" "Yes." Amy immediately nodded without any hesitation. She rushed into the room with excitement on her face and accepted the chair from Irina with glee. She then strode over to Brent and began to size up her chair and his head, trying to find the best angle to strike from. Irina repressed the urge to smile as she adopted a serious expression, and asked, "Why are you so quick to believe me? Aren't you afraid that I'm a bad person?" "It's all right, father says that in a fight between two people, the ugly one has to be the baddie. You're so beautiful, big sister, so there's no way that you're a baddie." Amy shook her head with a serious expression as she pointed at Brent, and said, "So he must be the baddie. Your father has a very good eye." Irina nodded, and before she knew it, her slightly dejected mood had been lifted. Not only was this little girl very adorable, her father also seemed to be quite interesting. Arg! Brent had just begun to come to his senses, yet the first thing that he saw was Amy holding a little chair in both hands, and he let loose a cry of shock and horror. "Shh!" Amy tried to tell Brent to be quiet, but she was already swinging her chair toward his face. Thump! The sturdy little wooden chair was instantly pulverized into countless shards of wood, leaving on 2 sections of chair legs in Amy's hands. Ugh! Brent fell unconscious again. "You sure are a quick learner." Irina turned to Amy with a rather surprised expression. This little girl's textbook chair-swinging form very much resembled her own. Hee hee. A wide beaming smile appeared on Amy's face. For some reason, she was very happy to be praised by this big sister. It was a completely different feeling from being praised by her father. However, there are still improvements that you can make. For example, you can tilt the chair slightly at an angle, then raise it high above your head, and strike his face from this angle. Bam! See? The sound was crisper that time, wasn't it? It sounds more satisfying this way. It really is. Let me try. Bam! If you swing in a different direction, you'll hear another type of sound. Bam! Wow! That's awesome! Let me try. Bam! Thump! Boom! Crash! Dull thumps erupted one after another, and the women's singles match had turned into a women's doubles collaboration. While the two of them struck Brent over and over again, they were having a serious discussion about force transfer and angles. "He seems to have fainted." Amy looked down at Brent, whose head now resembled that of a pig, and she stuck out her little tongue as she tossed the sections of chair legs in her hands onto the ground. "Nicely done, little girl." Irina also tossed the sections of chair legs in her hands onto the ground, and she glanced at the doorway before turning to Amy with a smile as she said, "I also have to go now. By the way, what's your name, little girl?" On the first floor of the Magus Tower, everyone still had yet to recover from the shock of witnessing Amy creating that extraordinary record. They could already envision the rise of a new legendary magic caster. She was only 4 years old, yet she was a 5th-tier magic caster who had only taken 20 seconds to scale 5 levels of the Magus Tower. It was impossible to imagine where her limits could lie. In that instant, everyone understood why Urian and Krasu had been willing to set aside their century-long feud and accept the same little half-elf girl. Not only that, but Krasu had even withdrawn from the Magus Tower and left Rodud to settle permanently in Chaos City for her. If he were to miss out on such an exceptional prodigy, there most likely wouldn't be another one like her even in 1,000 years. Richard was still forcing himself to maintain a calm expression, but his trembling beard and tightly clenched fists betrayed the true extent of the emotional turmoil that he was experiencing. The fire spirit lotus was next to useless to him, but it was a treasure of the same caliber as the water spirit jewel. He had initially prepared to exchange it for a water spirit jewel. However, he now had to hand it over to Krasa free of charge. All of the magic casters in Richard's faction had also fallen completely silent. The short and fat magic caster who had predicted Kola's victory had slunk his way to the back of the crowd, not daring to raise his head as he buried his chin into his chest. Krasu had left the Magus Tower, then come back with his disciple, and severely humiliated the Magus Tower. "Your daddy would always be your daddy," All of the magic casters present were very dejected, but they were satisfied that they had lost fair and square. None of the ordinary magic casters felt anything other than disappointment and shame. After all, Krasu was their senior, so he had every right to teach them a lesson. Krasu hadn't ever accepted a disciple in his life, yet he had suddenly taken a half-elf little girl under his wing, so it only made sense that she was an extraordinary prodigy. Furthermore, Richard had also attempted to humiliate Krasu by sending Hank and George to Chaos City back when Krasu had only just taken Amy as his disciple, so he had every right to retaliate. Kola is also about to come out soon as well. Go and get him. Richard's voice was slightly strained. Yes. A tall and thin magic caster beside him nodded before quickly departing. I'll go get Amy, Mag said to Krasu before quickly following along behind that tall and thin magic caster. He wasn't used to having Amy out of his sight, especially in a place like the Magus Tower. Krasu nodded in response before turning to Richard. He extended a hand, and said, "Hand over your fire spirit lotus." Humph! Richard harumphed coldly as he turned to Krasu, and said, "I don't know what kind of tricks she used to scale the tower this quickly, but seeing as she's already mastered manifestation magic and ability endowment, how about she and Kola have a real match? Aside from that fire spirit lotus, I also have a flame spirit crystal that I'm willing to bet." Krasu's eyes lit up slightly up hearing this. Really? Richard poked his hand into his wide sleeve and produced a box that was emanating fiery red light. The box opened, and a crystal that resembled red amber was revealed. There was a tiny little dragon slowly whizzing around within the crystal as if it were a living creature. "All right, I'll take you up on that bet." Krasu immediately nodded as he looked at the flame spirit crystal in Richard's hand. The flame spirit crystal was superb cultivation material for fire-type magic casters, one that was far more valuable than the fire spirit lotus. This item could only be found in the lava of active volcanoes that had existed for tens of thousands of years, and almost no one had ever seen one. It was a legendary object that was sought after by countless fire-type magic casters, and it was rather ironic that a water-type magic caster like Richard would possess one. Richard stowed away the flame spirit crystal in his hand, and looked at Krasu as he thought to himself, "I don't know what tricks you used to make her scale the tower that quickly, but using tricks to accelerate her growth is only going to hurt her in the long run. She progressed 5 levels in 2 months, so her foundation is almost non-existent. How is she going to be able to perform in a battle?" Amy looked at Irina, and suddenly recalled her father's cautionary words spoken to her on the night before they had set off for Rodu. Even though this big sister didn't appear to be a bad person, Mag would definitely scold her if she told this big sister her real name. As such, she thought to herself for a moment before smiling as she replied, "I'm Xiaomi 1. Xiaomi." Irina was stunned to hear this name. She suddenly thought back to when she had returned to the wind forest on the cusp of labor. After her daughter was born, she gave her the name Amy, as well as Xiaomi as a pet name. She had silver hair, bright blue eyes, pointy little ears, a slightly round face that bore a hint of resemblance to Alex, and facial features that resembled her own. In particular, Irina felt as if she could see the shadow of another person in the little girl's smile. She was reminded of the cold and forbidding knight who once stood at the pinnacle of the entire continent, but would often smile like a young boy when he was with her. No, it can't be her. This is Rodu, this is the Magus Tower. How could she be here? Irina felt as if her heart had been grasped tightly with an iron grip. Her mind told her no, but the more that she looked at Amy, the more her heart told her that this was her daughter. She couldn't help but reach toward Amy's face, and grazed a finger over her slightly chubby cheek. "Your face is so soft. Father says using milk to wash my face every day will make it really soft." Amy rubbed her cheek against Irina's hand, and her eyes narrowed in a beaming smile, giving her the appearance of a content little kitten. How can she be this adorable? Irina felt as if her heart were about to melt, and she was suddenly struck by a strong impulsive urge. Who cares whose child she is, I should just kidnap her. Whenever I'm in a bad mood, I can just squeeze her little cheeks, it'll be much more fun than looking after goldfish. Wait, that's not the point. Irina shook her head to rid herself of that strange train of thought, and she recomposed herself before asking, Xiaomi, who's your father? And what about your mother? Amy was basking in the comforting sensation of rubbing her cheek against Irina's hand when her eyes suddenly snapped open. Could it be that this was the kind of bad person that her father had told her about? The kind that started off by asking for her name, then asking about her parents before abducting her in the end? My father is a super great chef, and everyone calls him Boss Mag. He's super strong and his food is super tasty. Amy smiled as she said, my mother is living on the moon, and she's looking down at me from the sky right now. Boss Mag? Xiaomi. Irina's eyes gradually widened as a series of connections were established in her mind. Right at this moment, the sound of footsteps approached from outside the room. One Xiao means little in Chinese, so she's essentially saying her name is Little Me. It must be father. Amy's eyes immediately lit up as she looked at Irina, and she quickly gathered her thoughts. If mother can't come back from the moon, then father will be very lonely. Should I try to get him a wife? I thought teacher Luna was really good, but I think father will like this beautiful big sister better. Father would definitely like such a beautiful big sister, right? Irina's brows furrowed slightly as she cast her gaze toward the entrance of the room. She then stroked Amy's cheek with a serious expression as she said, I'm going now, Xiao Mi, don't tell anyone that you saw me here, and if anyone asks, you didn't beat up this bad guy, either. All right. Amy nodded obediently, but for some reason, she felt reluctant to part with this beautiful big sister. As Irina was about to leave, Amy quietly asked, what's your name, big sister? I'm Irina. I'll come back to find you again. Irina smiled before stomping her delicate foot onto Brent's face one last time. Immediately thereafter, golden light flashed beneath her feet and a small teleportation formation appeared, transporting her away from this place. Mag had heard the sound of Amy's voice, and he strode into the room, only to find Amy and Brent, the latter cowering in the corner of the room and entirely unrecognizable. He hurried over to Amy and wrapped her in his arms with a concerned expression as he asked, Are you all right? Are you hurt anywhere? Is that Master Brent? The magic caster who had accompanied Mag to the 5th floor, Roy, suddenly let loose a cry of surprise as he rushed over to the fatso in the corner. He wanted to help Brent to his feet, but the latter was completely curled up into a ball, and he didn't know where to lay his hands. He was momentarily at a loss for what to do as he turned to Amy with a wary expression, and asked, Did you do this to Master Brent? Brent? Mag turned his attention to the fatso in the corner. He had been so severely disfigured that Mag didn't even recognize him at first. He's a 10th tier magic caster, and he's in home territory here in the Magus Tower, who would be powerful enough and have the courage to do this to him? What could have possibly happened here? A string of questions surfaced in Mag's mind as he sifted through all of the powerful beings in Alex's memories. However, aside from Krasu, he couldn't think of anyone else who had the guts and the power to do something like this. Mag also turned to Amy. Perhaps she had seen what had just happened. I saw that this door was open, and I thought it was the exit, so I came in. He was already like this when I got here, and I was just passing by, Amy replied with an innocent shrug. Roy looked at Amy, then at Brent, and he quickly believed Amy's story. After all, Brent was a 10th tier magic caster, and no matter how freakishly talented this little girl was, there was no way that she would be able to reduce Master Brent to such a miserable state. Master Krasu was probably the only one on the entire continent who would dare to hand Master Brent such a severe beating here in the Magus Tower. However, Krasu was still on the 1st floor of the tower, so this clearly had nothing to do with him. Who was it that had snuck into the Magus Tower, then? A shiver ran down Roy's spine. If someone really had infiltrated the Magus Tower, and then assaulted Master Brent in such a horrendous manner without anyone noticing, then the Magus Tower was no longer safe. He had to report this matter to President Richard right away. If you two have nothing to do with this, then please go back downstairs. Roy rose to his feet and indicated for Mag and Amy to leave. He then strode out the door himself to gather a couple of magic casters to carry Brent downstairs. He required immediate treatment. This sandstorm python was a bit more difficult to handle than I expected, but it still only took me 2 minutes to defeat it, so I broke my last record by about 10 seconds. As expected, I really am a genius. Kola looked down at the fallen python before stepping through the exit as he said to himself, that little brat is probably still stuck on the second floor. What was the point of this contest? White light flashed and Kola emerged outside with a triumphant smile on his face, anticipating all of the praise he was going to receive for setting a new record. However, the sight that greeted him had his smile completely stiffening on his face. The little brat who he had thought would still be trapped on the second level had just walked out from the opposite room with her father. Are my eyes playing tricks on me? Kola closed his eyes before reopening them, but Amy and Mag were still standing before him. However, on this occasion, Roy had also emerged from that room. How could this be? Kola's eyes widened with incredulity. Amy was also on the 6th floor, so did that mean that she had also successfully passed the 5th level? And she had done so faster than he had? Impossible. There's no way anyone can be faster than me. Kola shook his head, and a thought suddenly occurred to him as he turned to Roy with a smile, and asked, "Brother Roy, you must have rescued that little girl from the 5th floor, right?" "No, she passed the 5th level by herself, and it only took her 80 seconds. Roy looked at Kola as he said in a rushed voice, "Hurry up and go downstairs." He then brushed past Kola and hurried away. The tower ascending match was completely insignificant compared to the alarming incident that had just taken place. 80 seconds. Roy's words were like a hammer blow to the head, instantly shattering Kola's confidence and leaving him dizzy and disoriented. He had broken his own tower ascending record on several occasions, and everyone was referring to him as the exceptional prodigy who would match the elven princess in the future. He was an extremely proud person, but he had just been defeated by a 4-year-old little girl in the area that was supposed to be his forte. This was too heavy a blow for him to handle. "Did you just come out, Big Cabbage? I've been waiting for a long time. You have to keep working hard so I don't have to wait as long next time," Amy encouraged with a smile. I. Kola stumbled back as he clasped his hand over his heart, feeling as if he had just been stabbed in the chest. "Let's go." Mag made his way downstairs with Amy's little hand in his. After rounding the corner, Mag picked up Amy in his arms, and quietly asked, "Amy, what did you see in there?" Roy had believed Amy's story earlier, but Mag could sense that she was hiding something. Amy looked around to verify that there was no one nearby before whispering in Mag's ear, "Father, I saw a super beautiful elf beating up a baddie, and she invited me to join in." She really was a super beautiful big sister. A beautiful elf. Mag faltered slightly upon hearing this, and a thought suddenly occurred to her. Aside from Krasu, there was someone else in this world who was powerful enough to assault Brent in the Magus Tower without being noticed. Mag suddenly felt his throat go dry, and his heart rate accelerated as he asked, "Did she tell you her name?" The answer was already very apparent to Mag, but he still wanted to hear Amy's reply. There was a very good chance that she had just met her mother for the first time, and two of them had just undertaken a mother and daughter bonding exercise by beating up Brent. That was a little too much for him to handle. Mag had thought extensively about what the first meeting between Amy and Irina would be like. He had even considered getting the system to make a moon replica so Amy wouldn't think that he had been lying to her. Father really does seem interested. Amy blinked as she whispered into Mag's ear, "She told me her name is Irina. She also told me to keep that a secret, so I'm only going to tell this to you. So it really was her. Mag was afflicted by a series of complex emotions. Even though the answer didn't surprise him at all, it still dealt him a rather heavy blow. From an emotional perspective, all of Alex's memories and feelings toward Irina had been wiped away, so Irina was nothing more than a stranger to Mag. Mag had transmigrated from a different world, and he was a completely different person compared to Alex, so he certainly had no intention of filling in for Alex as Irina's lover. That simply wouldn't be fair for either of them. However, the undeniable fact was that she was Amy's mother, so they were connected whether he liked it or not. As for his own personal feelings toward Irina, Mag would have to ascertain those after meeting her in person. In his heart, he would have to recover his former power and gather sufficient allies before seeking out Irina, but who would have thought that she was also in Rodu, and that she would bump into Amy here? Father? Father? Are you thinking about big sister Irina? Amy waved her little hand in front of Mag's eyes. Only then did he return to his senses. He asked, "Did you tell her your name? And did she say anything to you?" "I told her my name was Xiaomi, and big sister Irina said that she was going to come and find me again. I can introduce her to you next time." Amy's eyes were wide with excitement, and her expression was saying, "Praise me, Father. Looks like she's already suspecting some things." Mag's emotions were cast into even more turmoil. If it were possible, he would naturally want Amy and Irina to reunite as well. He wanted Amy to know who her mother was so she could receive the maternal love that she deserved. However, the king's birthday was imminent, and representatives from all races had flocked to Rodu. Sean and Josh were also constantly lurking in the shadows, and there would be countless pairs of eyes focused on Irina's every move. If his cover were to be blown, he would most likely experience the same thing as 3 years ago. On that occasion, even Alex was unable to protect Amy. How could Irina possibly defend him and Amy at the same time? Mag didn't want to experience the same tragedy again, but he couldn't bear to see Amy and Irina brush shoulders without identifying each other. The image of Amy murmuring for her mother in her sleep was still fresh in his mind, and he could only imagine what it felt like for Amy to have such a gaping hole in her life. What should I do? Mag felt as if he were being faced with an irresolvable predicament. You should be calling her auntie, Mag said to Amy. He couldn't allow her to call her mother big sister, as that would completely jumble the generational hierarchy. Father, big sisters won't like you if you call them old. Amy shook her head as if she were teaching Mag a valuable life lesson as she continued, big sisters have to be called big sisters. If you call them auntie, they won't like you. Mag opened his mouth, but was at a loss for a reply. Who would have thought that she would be so good at reading women's hearts? However, if she didn't know that Irina was her mother, then why did it appear as if she was trying to hook him up with Irina? Amy seemed to have seen the question in Mag's eyes, and she continued, Father, the moon is so far away, wouldn't it be very difficult to rescue Mother from there? I feel like you'll be too lonely when I'm taking my lessons, so how about I find you a wife? That way, she can stay with you, and I'll replace her after my lessons so she can go home. I feel like Irina is really good for that job. That's your mother you're talking about. Rolled his eyes internally. He didn't know how to respond to Amy, who was trying to hook him up with none other than her own mother. He finally knew why she was being so enthusiastic now. He found it quite amusing that Amy was talking about a wife like she was talking about a shift worker, but he was mostly very touched by her thoughtfulness. She was so worried that he would be lonely by himself that she was even willing to set aside her mother. What do you think, Father? My idea is super awesome, right? Amy was looking at Mag with an expectant look as she said, if we get a wife for you, she'll also be able to help you wash the clothes and prepare the ingredients. You won't have to work so hard then, Father. You think you've got it all figured out even though this is the first time you've met her. Mag tapped Amy's forehead with a smile. According to the information that he had gathered on Irina, Amy's plan was clearly unrealistic. The elven princess was not someone who would be content to wash clothes and prepare ingredients all day. Even if she were willing to do that, it simply wouldn't feel right to him. Mag looked around before he said in a serious voice, "Amy, don't tell anyone about seeing big sister Irina here, okay?" Amy looked at Mag with a serious expression and nodded as she replied, "Don't worry, father, I definitely won't introduce her to anyone else. You have to work hard, though. What is in that little head of yours?" Mag couldn't help but burst into laughter. He didn't speak any further about this subject as he carried Amy downstairs. As things currently were, he could only think on his feet and adapt to the situation as it transpired. He also had to hope that Irina would be smart enough not to act rashly and blow his cover. Mag carried Amy down to the first floor, and all of the magic casters parted to create a path for them. All of the magic casters were looking at Amy, some with resentment in their eyes, while others were quite excited as if they were witnessing a future legendary figure. "Everyone, get out of the way!" All of a sudden, Roy and two other magic casters stormed down the stairs, carrying Brent on a stretcher as he yelled, "President! Master Brent was attacked and has been severely injured." All of the magic casters erupted into an uproar as they looked at the disfigured Brent. What happened? Richard was also quite stunned to hear this as he hurriedly made his way forward. The fact that Brent had been beaten to such a horrific extent in the Magus Tower was most definitely a direct act of provocation to their Magus Tower. What unsettled him even further was that he had been completely oblivious as the incident was taking place. "Hart, treat his wounds," Richard commanded with a dark expression. A magic caster with a medium build stepped forward before unleashing healing magic. Blue light enveloped Brent's body, and his bruised and battered face slowly began to recover toward a more normal pallor. After throwing up a mouthful of blood, Brent slowly opened his eyes. The first thing that he caught sight of was Amy, and his eyes immediately widened. He threw his arms around his head reflexively, and howled, "Not the face! What happened to Elder Brent? Who did this to him? It looks like he was bashed in the face by a chair. But with Elder Brent's immense power, how could that have happened to him? Could it be because he's always sexually harassing the female magic casters in our Magus Tower, and someone took vengeance on him? If that's the case, then he deserves everything he got. If it were me, I'd also want to slam that sick pervert in the face with a chair." All of the magic casters were quite surprised by the sight of Brent's miserable state, but there was an overwhelming current of gloating elation intermingled with that shock. All of the female magic casters present seemed to be of the opinion that justice had been served. Crasso was also looking at Brent with an elated expression of approval as he murmured to himself, "He really did receive quite a thorough beating. I feel like my job has been done for me." Just as everyone was discussing spiritedly among themselves, Brent woke up, and his reflexive reaction toward Amy made everyone in the entire Magus Tower fall silent. All of the magic casters turned to Amy with disbelief in their eyes. Brent was accusing Amy of being the one who had done this to him? But he was a 10th tier great magic caster. No matter how prodigious Amy was, she was still only a 5th tier magic caster. There was an insurmountable gap between the two of them. Kola had just descended from the staircase in a dejected mood, and he was also rooted to the spot upon seeing this. If even Master Brent had been beaten to such a state by this little girl, then it was no wonder that he had lost to her. "Little Amy, did you really do this to him?" Crasso turned to Amy with an inquisitive expression. His voice wasn't critical in the slightest. Instead, it was filled with anticipation as if he wished for nothing more than for Amy to have been the one who had inflicted such horrific injuries on Brent. Richard turned his gaze toward Amy with furrowed brows. There was only a handful of people who could assault Brent in the Magus Tower without being discovered, and this little half-elf girl clearly wasn't one of them. His voice cooled significantly as he commanded, "Brent, tell me what happened." Brent was still trembling uncontrollably with his eyes closed and his arms wrapped around his head. Only after seeing Richard and the magic casters around him did he realize that he was no longer in that dark room. He immediately heaved a long sigh of relief before slumping to the ground in a completely feeble manner as he replied, "That woman. That woman came to Rodu, and that's enough." A dangerous light flashed through Richard's eyes as he cut off Brent before turning to Amy. "What does this have to do with her?" Brent seemed to have realized that he had said something he shouldn't have said, and he immediately shut his mouth. However, as he turned to look at Amy, the mental image of her raising a chair high into the air before bringing it down on his face resurfaced in his mind. His voice rose a few octaves, reaching a borderline screech as he cried, "That little brat hit me. She used a chair to hit me in the face. I didn't." "You're lying." Amy shook her head with a pitiable expression as she denied, "I'm just a little elf who happened to be passing by. You must have been beaten silly if you think I hit you." Compared to the screeching Brent, the SAHDR cable Amy was clearly more convincing. Who would believe that such an adorable little girl would be capable of bashing people with chairs? Furthermore, Brent was an elder of the Magus Tower, a 10th tier magic caster, yet he was claiming that he had been beaten with a chair by a 4-year-old little girl? This was clearly slander. All of the magic casters present were starting to get rather angry. The Magus Tower could accept losing to someone, but what they couldn't accept was being dishonored. Brent's actions were a complete disgrace to the Magus Tower. "That's enough, Brent. I keep telling you to drink less, but you never listen. You must have drunk too much and hit your head." Richard's expression had also darkened significantly as he turned to Roy, and instructed, "Carry him back to his room." Brent still wanted to say something, but a vicious glare from Richard had him swallowing his words. He glanced at the nearby Krasu, and a chill suddenly ran down his spine as he suddenly realized who this little half-elf girl was. Krasu's new disciple was none other than a little half-elf girl. But, Roy still wanted to say something. In the dark room where he had discovered the unconscious Brent, he had discovered splinters and other pieces of broken chairs all over the place. That was not a scene that could be created just by Brent falling over and hitting his head after a drunken adventure. However, he also swallowed his words at the sight of Richard's thunderous expression, and he helped Brent to his feet with the help of 2 other magic casters before departing. Amy turned to Mag and gave him a smug little smile. Mag also smiled back at her as he patted her little head. She sure was a smart little girl. She had already learned how to use her advantages to convince others to believe her. "I can't believe Master Brent was this type of person. Could it be that he's trying to slander that little girl just because she beat Hank? I heard Hank even used forbidden magic during their battle, but was still defeated by her in the end. After that, he got what he deserved, and was disabled by Master Krasu. Could it be that Brent is trying to avenge him? Like master, like disciple, they're both scum." All of the magic casters were discussing among themselves in quiet voices as they glared at Brent with disdain, and everyone's resentment toward Brent seemed to have erupted in that moment. "Hold on." Right at this moment, Krasu suddenly made his way over to Brent with a smile as the latter lay on a stretcher. Krasu examined his face, and clicked his tongue with wonder as he said, "There aren't many people in the world who could give such thorough beatings with just a chair. It's like a work of art. I was going to teach you a lesson as well, but there's no place for me to strike you, tisk, tisk." Brent was trembling as he lay on the stretcher, and cold sweat was pouring down his face. He did his best to suppress his agony as he forced a smile onto his face, and said, "Master Krasu, I heard that you had come to visit our Magus Tower, and in my hurry to greet you, I accidentally fell down the stairs. Please forgive me for my tardiness, arg. That's hurts. It hurts? Your skin is almost as thick as the walls of Rodu, how can a gentle pinch like this hurt?" Krasu wore a benevolent smile on his face with a large section of Brent's skin pinched between his fingers in a pincer-like grip as he slowly twisted his hand. Brent's face had turned deathly pale, and he was on the brink of falling unconscious. However, he still forced a smile onto his face as he said in a trembling voice, It doesn't hurt after all, it doesn't hurt? Are you saying I'm old, and no longer have any strength left?" Krasu abruptly twisted Brent's skin in a sharp, vicious motion, twisting his swollen face into an unrecognizable state. Urgh! Brent's blood-curdling howls erupted throughout the entire Magus Tower. That's enough, Krasu. This is the Magus Tower, not a place for you to do as you please. Richard raised a hand to conjured up a blue hand of water, which grabbed toward Krasu. Piss off! Krasu slapped the oncoming hand into oblivion before landing a vicious backhanded slap on Brent's face. His blood-curdling howls immediately came to an abrupt halt as he fell unconscious once again. Krasu turned to Richard with a cold smile, and said, "Let's settle this with a battle. My disciple will crush yours." Chapter 714 Come on out, fatty ugly duckling. Richard looked deep into Krasu's eyes, then turned to the depressed Kola, and said, "Kola, I command you to battle her. Defeat is not an option." "Really?" Kola's eyes immediately lit up. He was of the opinion that Krasu must have taught Amy some special tricks for her to ascend 5 levels of the tower in 80 seconds. In fact, he was sure that she had cheated somehow. However, if they were going to have a fair duel, then he was confident that he would be able to attain victory and recover his lost honor. Krasu also turned to Amy with a smile as he said, "Little Amy, you'll have to fight him in a short while. There's no need to hold back, hit him as hard as you can." "All right." Amy nodded eagerly before casting her gaze toward her surroundings as if she were looking for something. Richard waved a hand through the air, and a large white circle with a radius of 10 meters appeared at the center of the first floor of the Magus Tower. A serious look appeared on his face as he announced, "This circle will be the venue for the battle. The loser will be the one who falls out of the white circle or no longer has the power to continue fighting or concedes the battle. Little brat, I'm going to show you what a true 5th-tier magic caster is made of." Kola aimed a vicious glare at Amy before making his way into the circle as he loudly announced, "Magus Tower, Kola. I found one." Amy let go of Mag's hand as she skipped over to a table, and picked up a little chair. She then also skipped into the circle as she responded in kind. "Mamie Restaurant, Amy." "Mamie Restaurant? What's that? Is it really a restaurant, or is it some kind of mysterious organization? Why is she carrying a chair into the circle? And it's a foldable chair as well. Is she planning to use that as a weapon? Could it be that she really did inflict those injuries onto Master Brent?" All of the magic casters looked on with curiosity in her eyes. "That's a good way to advertise our restaurant." Mag nodded with approval. Amy really was the perfect mascot for Mamie Restaurant. Perhaps it would be a good idea to start thinking about advertising the establishment. After all, one restaurant alone was earning revenue at a rate that was still too slow, so expansion had to take place sooner or later. However, as he looked at Amy holding a foldable chair as she sized up Kola, he couldn't help but be reminded of Sargeras. Could it be that she was really going to use that chair to fight Kola? Foldable chairs are very commonplace objects that are often underrated in battle. I'm very pleased that she's able to source weapons from her environment rather than dogmatically cling to her staff. As expected of my prized disciple. Krasu nodded with an expression of approval. He was clearly not concerned in the slightest that Amy wasn't using her staff. Kola looked at the chair in Amy's hands with furrowed brows as he asked, "You're not going to use a wand?" "Master tells me that as long as I have magic in my heart, anything can be used as a weapon, so why do I have to use a wand? I think this chair is quite good." Amy shrugged with a rather perplexed look. "Insolent little brat." A furious look appeared on Kola's face. This little brat was clearly not taking him seriously at all. "This big cabbage is so weird, why is he getting angry just because I'm using a chair?" Amy was very confused as she looked at Kola. She then shook her head as she thought to herself, "Whatever. I just learned some special chair swinging techniques from Big Sister Irina earlier, I'll test them on his face." Richard looked at the chair in Amy's hands, and his expression darkened even further. This little brat was intent on humiliating the Magus Tower, just as Kraso was. However, he wasn't concerned in the slightest, as he didn't believe that a 4-year-old little brat would be able to beat Kola with just a chair even for a single second. As such, he loudly announced, "There's no need for either of you to hold back. If either of you fall into a dangerous situation, we'll step in immediately. However, the one that is forced to receive our protection will be deemed as the loser. Let the battle begin." Kola was holding a bluish-silver wand in his hand as he looked at Amy with a cold smile. "Remember my name, little brat, my name is Kola." A contemplative look appeared on Amy's face before she shook her head, and replied, "I prefer big cabbage, you." Kola's expression became even more enraged. "Are we starting? I'm going to attack now." Amy looked at Kola as she slowly raised her chair. Even though Kola was comprehensively defeated in the tower ascending competition, I think he has a good chance of winning in a practical battle like this. I wouldn't be so sure about that. Melee magic casters are invincible in short-range battles. That circle is not very big at all, so I think Amy has a better chance of winning. A chair versus a wand, that sure is a rare matchup. All of the magic casters were looking on with expectant expressions. No one had been able to witness the tower ascending trials, so they didn't know just how powerful Amy was. As such, this battle was something that they were very much looking forward to watching. "Come. I'll only need to cast one spell to defeat you." Kola looked at Amy with a disdainful expression before adopting a pose he thought to be quite cool, aiming his wand at Amy in a slanted manner. As soon as he had adopted that pose, a chair took over his entire field of vision before landing on his face with unavoidable speed and unerring accuracy. 3 magic shields were erected in quick succession, but all of them were shattered by the seemingly ordinary wooden chair. "No!" The chair crashed into Kola's face amid a cry of horror. Thump! A crisp crack erupted as wooden splinters flew in all directions. Kola was also sent flying like a cannonball, and only stopped after sliding along the ground for quite a distance. By then, the left half of his face had already swelled up significantly. All of the magic casters who were looking forward to a spectacular battle were flabbergasted. As soon as the battle had begun, what appeared to be 2 balls of fire had suddenly materialized beneath Amy's feet. She then instantly appeared before Kola and sent him flying with her chair. "I'm starting to believe what Elder Brent said earlier," a magic caster gulped. With her speed and power, even a 7th-tier magic caster would most likely be wounded if they were caught off guard. The magic caster beside him nodded in agreement. Is Kola going to lose just like that? All of the magic casters harbored complex emotions as they looked at Kola, who was lying at the edge of the white circle. If news were to spread of the fact that he had been defeated by a single attack from a little 4-year-old girl, the Magus Tower's reputation would be swept to the ground. Kola himself was also completely dumbstruck. The searing pain shooting through the left side of his face assured him that this was not a dream, but he felt as if he were living in a nightmare. It was completely inexplicable to him that he had just been swatted flying with a chair to the face by a little girl. "Kola, are you just going to keep lying there?" Richard let loose an enraged roar. Kola shuddered as he rose to his feet. He was feeling rather uneasy as he looked at Richard's cold expression. He then turned his attention to Amy, and wasted no time with words as he immediately began to chant a spell. A massive blue python quickly took shape in front of him before pouncing toward Amy with its huge mouth completely agape. "Come on out, fatty ugly duckling." Amy pointed toward the python in an unhurried manner. When the massive python had appeared, most of the magic casters had thought that this would be a massive turning point in the battle. After all, the python that Kola had manifested was enough to put his 5th tier power on full display. And then, a massive orange ball fell from the sky, crushing the massive python and knocking out Kola beneath its massive backside. The outcome of the match had been decided. Everyone had fallen completely silent as they looked at the gargantuan ball of an orange, as well as the unconscious Kola beneath it, who was frothing at the mouth. "Holy F***ck, only expletives could express the feelings that the magic casters present were currently experiencing. Meow. Ugly Duckling was being held in Mag's arms, and it stared at the massive orange ball with wide eyes, then down at its own round belly, and it made a conscious effort to suck in its stomach as much as it could. This is how manifestation magic should be used. Mag was also in awe. At the same time, he was very glad that Amy hadn't manifested a massive version of him. After a prolonged silence, all of the magic casters erupted into an uproar. Everyone was discussing the efficacy of such an attack. This was a disposable spell, and if it were to miss its target, then it would be completely useless. However, if it struck its target, then the magic and body of a 5th-tier magic caster would clearly be no match for such a simple yet effective strike. Krasu turned to Richard with a wide smile on his face. Richard, your disciple has already lost the power to battle. In this case, the victory belongs to Amy, right? So how about you hand over my Fire Spirit Lotus and Flame Spirit Crystal? Richard's face darkened to an alarming extent as he flipped his hand over to produce the Fire Spirit Lotus and the Flame Spirit Crystal. He tossed the 2 items to Krasu as he sneered, "Humph, all she does is play little dirty tricks. There's no future for her." Krasu accepted the 2 items, and his smile grew even wider. After stowing the items away, he smiled, and replied, "Regardless of whether she has a future or not, the fact of the matter is that she can crush all of your Magus Tower's so-called prodigies with ease. Also, I really must thank you for these 2 fire-type treasures." Richard was enraged beyond belief as he glowered at Krasu. "Krasu, you spent several decades of your life at our Magus Tower, are you really so intent on making the Magus Tower your enemy? I don't care how long I spent in this place, all I know is that it's no longer the place that I envisioned it to be." Krasu turned to all of the magic casters present with a menacing smile as he said, "Also, I have a habit, if anyone takes something I own and ruins it, I'd destroy it and make another one." The entire Magus Tower immediately fell silent, and all of the magic casters present wore complex expressions. Richard opened his mouth, but repressed the urge to say anything in the end. Amy made her way over to Mag, and squeezed Ugly Duckling's cheek with a serious expression as she said, "Do you see that, Ugly Duckling? If you keep eating like you're doing now, you're going to become like this. If that happens, I can only throw you around to squash baddies." Meow. The mental image of itself being thrown around as a ball surfaced in Ugly Duckling's mind, and it shuddered as it shook its head with a pitiable expression. "Let's go, little Amy, Boss Mag." Krasu turned toward them before giving Amy a thumbs up. A benevolent smile appeared on his face as he praised, "Well done, Amy." Krasu and the others departed from the Magus Tower. A weary look appeared on Richard's face as he raised a hand, and said, "There's nothing more to see here." A blue rope of water gently picked up Kola from the ground, following which both he and Kola disappeared from the hall on the 1st floor of the tower. As expected of Master Krasu, he really is the Lord of Fire. But from the sounds of it, he seems to be threatening to destroy our Magus Tower again. If no mishaps occur, that little half-elf girl is most likely going to be crushing all of the magic casters of the younger generation. It feels like everyone else is still learning to crawl, yet she can already sprint. All of the magic casters dispersed, but they were still quietly discussing the events that had just taken place. Even though it had only been a battle between 2 5th-tier magic casters, it was quite possible that the outcome of this battle was going to dictate the future of the magic world for at least the next several decades, if not the next few centuries. Brent had only just woken up after being slapped unconscious by Krasu. He turned over in his bed, only to discover Richard standing by his bedside, upon which he hurriedly got up into a sitting position. "What happened?" Richard asked with furrowed brows. "Master Richard," Brent gave Richard a recount of the incident that had taken place earlier. After a brief hesitation, he decided to gloss over the part where Amy had smacked him with her chairs. As a great magic caster, it would be far too embarrassing for him if news were to spread that he had been physically assaulted by a little 4-year-old half-elf girl. Richard's brows furrowed even deeper as he said, I didn't think that the elven race would send Irina this time. Looks like she's already aware of the fact that our Magus Tower is connected to that incident from 3 years ago. Brent was a little panicked as he said, President, what should we do now? Irina is too powerful, there's no one in our Magus Tower who can match her in battle aside from you. If she attempts another sneak attack like she did today, she could easily kill anyone in our Magus Tower. In contrast, Richard wasn't concerned in the slightest as he coldly said, she didn't kill you, which means she's still not sure who exactly participated in that assassination 3 years ago. Besides, this is Rodu, not the Wind Forest, she can't just kill someone from our Magus Tower on a whim. If she really does try to hunt down members of our Magus Tower, we have every right to kill her here in Rodu, and the elven race won't be able to do anything to us. Brent's eyes immediately lit up upon hearing this. Richard continued, send someone to inform His Highness, the second prince, about what Irina did in Rodu today. His Highness will have a way to deal with her. All right. Brent hurriedly nodded before clambering out of bed and stumbling outside in a rather unsteady manner. Your Highness, the assassination 3 years ago was orchestrated by you, so you have to take care of this matter. Our Magus Tower isn't going to suffer the consequences of your actions. Richard disappeared from the room. A horse-drawn carriage departed from the Magus Tower, weaving through the streets as it headed toward the northern region of the city, which was where all of the renowned restaurants of Rodu were gathered. Master, my chair swing just then was super awesome, right? Amy turned to Crasso with a joyful expression. I couldn't have done it better myself, little Amy. Crasso nodded with a content expression. Tisk, but I didn't learn that attack from Master, Amy said with a shake of her head. You didn't learn it from me? Then whom did you learn it from? Crasso raised his eyebrows upon hearing this. Could it be that Urian was teaching Amy melee magic? Bam! Right at this moment, a muffled thump erupted, and the horse-drawn carriage came to an abrupt halt. Did I hit him too hard? A slightly apologetic voice rang out from outside the carriage. It seemed as if the horse-drawn carriage had crashed into something before stopping cold in its tracks. Mag immediately wound his arms around Amy as a wary look appeared on his face. It sounded as if the coach driver had already been knocked out, so it appeared that they were under attack. I know that voice. Crasso's brows furrowed slightly. Mag had thrown both arms around Amy, releasing Ugly Duckling in the process. As such, it was thrown off the seat by the momentum of the crash, and was flung out of the carriage. It's big sister Irina. As soon as Amy heard that voice, an elated look appeared on her face as she threw aside the curtain on the carriage. Irina. Mag turned his attention toward the front of the carriage. An elf in a white dress was standing in front of the horse-drawn carriage, holding the trembling Ugly Duckling in her hands. Ugly Duckling had already curled up into a ball from fear. She was holding in front of her face, inspecting it with a pair of curious eyes. The light of the warm autumn sun shone down on her as if it were draping a golden veil over her body. Her long silver hair was casually draped over her shoulders, and as her luscious locks were picked up by the autumn wind, she appeared as if she were a celestial maiden who had descended from the heavens. The golden crescent moon insignia also gave her a sense of holiness and mystique. She was like the first budding seedling emerging from the snow during the transition from winter to spring, and the sight of her made Mag's heart shudder slightly. Is this what love feels like? Mag raised his eyebrows. Alex's memories of Irina didn't return to him, nor did they affect him in any way. As far as he was concerned, this was the first time that this beautiful elf had entered his world. Her arrival was like a gentle spring breeze blowing through his heart. It's so fat that it looks like a ball. It should be really delicious if I were to cook it, right? Irina stared at Ugly Duckling with a contemplative expression. Amy hurriedly shook her head with a serious expression as she said, No, you can't cook it yet, big sister Irina. Ugly Duckling is going to grow up to become a white swan in the future, and I heard from father that roast goose is super delicious. Irina examined Ugly Duckling with a skeptical expression, and asked, "Really? This ball can grow up to become a white swan? And you're saying that roast goose is really delicious?" "It is. Father told me that the little girl who was selling matchsticks forgot to go home for food because she was too busy looking at roast goose, and she ended up dying from hunger outside the roast goose restaurant, so roast goose has to be really, really delicious," Amy confirmed with a nod. Irina also nodded with a contemplative look, and said, "I see. Let's keep it for a while, then." "All right." Amy accepted Ugly Duckling from Irina and held it in her arms. "Meow!" Ugly Duckling cried out in a pitiable manner, wondering what it had done to deserve this. Mag buried his face into his palm upon seeing this. There was no doubt that Irina was Amy's mother, they had the exact same reflex arc. "So it really is you, little Irina?" I knew that voice sounded really familiar. Krasu wore a meaningful smile on his face as he asked, "You bumped into that fat bastard, Brent, at the Magus Tower earlier, didn't you?" "I sure did, old man Whitebeard. Long time no see." Irina nodded at Krasu as she cupped her fist, and said, "This is my first day at Rodu, so I thought I'd bash him to cheer myself up. I also find bashing him very satisfying. I slapped him really hard this morning, and I suddenly felt completely reinvigorated." Krasu nodded before a confused look appeared on his face, and he asked, "Come to think of it, how do you know little Amy?" "Little Amy?" Irina's eyes lit up. Her name was Amy, her pet name is Xiaomi, and she had silver hair as well as blue eyes. Was this really all just a coincidence? Mag looked at Irina as he scrambled for a way to place her, but was unable to think of anything. Amy was constantly yearning for her mother, and it didn't take much to guess how much Irina missed Amy. He simply couldn't bear to have them brush shoulders with one another without realizing who the other person was. Irina turned her attention toward Mag, and her bright blue eyes sparkled as she attempted to find traces of Alex in this man. She discovered that Mag was quite handsome in his own right, but his appearance was completely different compared to Alex. There was also no hint of Alex in his eyes. The eyes were the window to one's soul, so one's eyes could never lie. The only similarities they shared was their height, but Alex was more well-built. Is he Alex or not? Could it be that he's completely altered his appearance to hide himself? Countless questions flashed through Irina's mind at once, and she shifted her gaze away from Mag with difficulty as she turned to Krasu and feigned a nonchalant expression. "I met Amy as I was beating up that fat bastard, Brent, and she helped out as well." Amy nodded with a joyful expression, and said, "I sure did. You see now, Master Krasu? I learned to swing a chair from big sister Irina, not you." Amy then looked at the coach driver slumped onto the ground, then at the wooden shards strewn over the place, and she asked, "Big sister Irina, did you hit the coach driver with a chair as well?" I didn't think that he would be so weak." Irina glanced down at the coach driver and stuck out her tongue in an apologetic manner. "We're going to the Renhe Food Street, but we don't have a coach driver now. What do we do?" A concerned look appeared on Amy's face. Irina's eyes lit up as she heard this. "You're going to the Renhe Food Street? I also want to go there. We just need someone to drive our carriage now." And then, everyone turned to Mag in unison. Irina looked at Mag, and she recalled the scenes when she and Alex had first met. A stern expression appeared on her face, and she commanded, "I'm the Elven Princess, Irina. I command you to be my coach driver and take us to the Renhe Food Street." I want to refuse this order, but why do I also feel happy about it? Mag was struck by a sense of mixed emotions, and that order also seemed to be strangely familiar to him. Could it be that he was a masochist who enjoyed being slave-driven? No. That can't be. I can't be a masochist. I have to at least be a submissive husband instead. Wait. Mag shook his head to rid himself of that strange train of thought as he spread his hands open in a resigned manner. "I'm a chef, not a coach driver. So you're unwilling to drive this coach for me? Irina looked into Mag's eyes. Of course he is. Father is really good at driving coaches. Hurry up and get on, big sister Irina. Before Mag had a chance to say anything, Amy had already replied in his stead. She then nudged Mag's arm with her little elbow and whispered into his ear, "Father, the big sister isn't going to like you if you refuse her." Mag turned to Amy. Nad opened his mouth, but he was at a complete loss for a response. He made his way out of the carriage with a resigned expression, and said, "Please board the carriage, princess." "So it really is you, Alex." Irina cast a meaningful glance at Mag before boarding the horse-drawn carriage and taking a seat beside Amy. She had heard the same answer 10 years ago, and 10 years since then, he had given her the same answer. It had to be him. Mag carried the unconscious coach driver onto the horse-drawn carriage before turning to Irina as he said, "You should administer some treatment for him. Can you heal his injuries but leave him unconscious? We have to take him back with us when we go back." "So you want him half dead?" "Sure." Irina nodded as she pointed a finger toward the coach driver's head. A spot of green light emerged from her fingertip before disappearing into the coach driver's glabella. "That's an interesting way to put it." Mag was a little speechless upon hearing Irina's response. However, Irina was doing as he requested, so he didn't say anything further about this matter. He kicked aside the wood splinters strewn all over the ground, and then asked a passerby for directions to the Renhe food street before slowly driving the horse-drawn carriage onward in an awkward and unrehearsed manner. Mag was a decent horse rider, but this was his first time driving a horse-drawn carriage. However, even though the carriage was trundling along at a rather slow rate, it was still moving nonetheless. Even though he was sitting outside the carriage, Mag's attention was almost entirely focused on what was going on within the carriage. He still wasn't sure if Irina had managed to identify him and Amy. All of Alex's memories of Irina had been wiped away, so he didn't even know what kind of personality Irina had. However, from his observations, he could conclude thus far that she was very brave, possessed an inexplicable reflex arc, had violent tendencies, and was rather haughty. "Big sister Irina, you said that you were going to come find me again, but I thought it would be a long time later. I didn't think you'd come to find me so quickly." Amy sat beside Irina with a beaming smile on her face. She then cast a glance outside the carriage and lowered her voice as she whispered, "I also told Father about you, and he's super excited to see you." "I only told Father and no one else about you, though." "Really? He doesn't appear all that excited to see me?" Irina questioned in a voice that was just loud enough to be heard by Mag. A resigned smile appeared on his face. It appeared that Amy was trying to act as matchmaker for her parents. "It's true. Father's just a little slow, but he definitely really likes you, and he's really good to women as well." Amy nodded in confirmation. "Which women has he been good to?" Irina asked in an amused voice. A chill suddenly ran down Mag's spine. He was petrified, fearing that Amy would blurt out something she shouldn't. He was suddenly struck by the feeling that Irina was a slightly terrifying woman. "No one, really." Amy shook her head in response. "Good." Only then did Irina slowly unclench her fists. Phew. Mag couldn't help but heave a sigh of relief. Thank heavens Amy knew what she should and shouldn't say. After a slight pause, Anna continued, "It's only teacher Luna, big sister Mia, big sister Aisha, big sister Gloria, big sister Vivian, big sister Anna. He's only good to those people. Sounds like a lot of beautiful big sisters." Irina's tone suddenly took a rather dangerous turn, and it felt as if the air temperature inside the carriage had plummeted significantly. "Luna is Amy's teacher, Mia and Aisha are waitresses at my restaurant, young Mistress Gloria and young Mistress Vivian are customers of my restaurant, and Anna is a 5-year-old one little elf that we rescued in the past." Mag didn't know why he was explaining these things, but he had a feeling that he would be in mortal danger if he refrained from elaborating on this matter. As a man, he felt that this wasn't a sign that he was scared of his wife, it was simply a gesture of respect toward women. He was a man who respected female rights. Yes, that was it. I see. Irina nodded indifferently, and the air temperature within the carriage seemed to have warmed up slightly again. However, right at this moment, Crassus suddenly interjected, I heard that young Mistress Gloria danced with Boss Mag during that banquet, didn't she? I'm not sure that she's just a customer of his restaurant. Mag was suddenly struck by the urge to throw himself off the carriage. Looks like Boss Mag really is popular with women, Irina mused with a menacing smile. Amy was completely oblivious to the killing intent radiating from Irina's body as a bewildered look appeared on her face. How did you know, Big Sister Irina? There are a lot of big sisters lining up outside the restaurant every day, talking about how they want to become father's wife and bear his children. Giddy up! As he sensed the plummeting air temperature behind him, Mag frantically swung his whip through the air. I'm Mag, and now I'm starting to panic. Irina withdrew her gaze from the curtain of the carriage before turning to the adorable little Amy. She felt as if her heart were about to melt at the mere sight of this beautiful little girl. This was the daughter whom she had been thinking about day and night. She was so small when she'd first been born, and she was a little ugly as well, so Irina had almost dropped her in her horror. However, it had only been a few years, and she already became this adorable. 3 years had passed since she had last seen her daughter, and she had thought that she and Mag were already dead. Who would have thought that she would get an opportunity to sit beside her daughter again like this? How should I get closer to her? Irina looked at Amy as she pondered to herself. Little kids were extremely foreign to her, and she didn't know how to interact with Amy. She reached out toward Amy in an awkward manner before withdrawing her hand again. She then decided to employ a more direct approach, and commanded, Xiaomi, get in my arms. Was that too harsh? Should I have been more gentle? Did I scare her? As soon as those words escaped from Irina's lips, she was thrown into a blind panic. As she looked at Amy and waited for her response, she felt as if she had never been so nervous in her life. Really? Amy's eyes lit up with elation and disbelief as she looked at Irina. She was struggling to believe her ears, such a beautiful big sister was asking to hug her? Do you not want to? Irina opened her arms and tried to speak in a more gentle tone, yet it still sounded like an order. Of course I do. Amy immediately nodded vehemently. She looked at Irina's open arms and hesitated momentarily before carefully approaching Irina, then rested her cheek against Irina's chest. So soft, so warm, so comfortable. Amy closed her eyes as she hugged Irina with her little arms. There was a comforting fragrance emanating from Irina's body. It was a rather floral scent, but it was more captivating than the fragrance of any flower. Amy felt as if she could fall asleep in an instant in Irina's arms. Mother's embrace must be just as warm as this. Amy thought to herself as a content smile appeared on her face. Xiaomi, my daughter, I've finally found you. Irina gently hugged Amy to her chest, basking in the warmth emanating from her body. She felt as if there were some kind of profound indescribable connection between them, linking them together. With Amy in her arms, she felt calmer and more content than ever before, just as if she were holding the entire world in her arms. It was an extraordinary feeling. Thump! Right at this moment, something crashing heavily into the horse-drawn carriage, and the entire carriage was almost flung into the air. One pretty sure it was 6 or 7, but author is a little bit inconsistent with such things. 2 wheels of the horse-drawn carriage left the ground one, and the entire carriage skidded toward a nearby wall on a horizontal path. The 2 horses drawing the carriage neighed in distress from the impact of the collision. Mag turned to the rhinoceros-drawn carriage beside them. He had one hand tightly gripping the reins of the horses while his other hand had grabbed onto the carriage's curtain, ready to fling it aside at a moment's notice. If the carriage were to crash into the wall, then Amy could get hurt, and that was something that he couldn't allow to happen. Right at this moment, a burst of gentle golden light appeared on the side of the horse-drawn carriage. The entire carriage decelerated dramatically as a result before gently sliding along the wall and down onto the ground. A humanoid figure rolled out of the horse-drawn carriage, plummeting straight to the ground. Mag looked at the unconscious coach driver on the ground, and he realized that they now had an excuse to offer to Josh about why the coach driver was unconscious. Hopefully, the coach driver would be suffering from memory loss, unable to recall that he had actually been knocked out by a chair. However, Mag's heart was still filled with rage. The framework on the side of the carriage had almost been snapped in half from the force of the impact, and one corner of the carriage had been shattered. If that film of golden light hadn't appeared to buffer the impact of the carriage crashing into the wall, it was quite likely that the entire horse-drawn carriage would have been in pieces by now. They were in Rodu, and this rhinoceros-drawn carriage was traveling at such a high speed on a road that was not very wide. These circumstances were already enough for the owner of the carriage to be charged with attempted murder. Mag turned to the rhinoceros-drawn carriage, and discovered a massive black rhino that was 2 meters tall and over 3 meters in length. The rhinoceros was clad in black armor, and it was glowering at Mag with its large eyes, looking as if it were about to attack at any moment. However, Mag's attention was drawn to the crest emblazoned on the rhinoceros-drawn carriage. It was the crest of the first prince's manor. Rhinoceros-drawn carriages were quite rare in Rodu to begin with, particularly those that were drawn by black berserker rhinos as this one. These rhinos were fourth-tier magic beasts commonly used by the Roth Empire's army to draw the military's battle carriages. They were extremely violent and short-tempered, and they would often injure people unless they were controlled by skilled beast tamers. However, the first prince really liked to use these black berserker rhinos to draw his manor's carriages, and accidents rarely ever happened. Sean. A mental image of the first prince appeared in Mag's mind. After crashing into their horse-drawn carriage, the middle-aged coach driver wasn't alarmed in the slightest. This was a horse-drawn carriage from the second prince's manor, and everyone in Rodu recognized the crest emblazoned on the carriage. As such, the driver had surely intentionally crashed into their carriage, and Sean was clearly the one behind all this. Behind the rhinoceros-drawn carriage, there were a dozen or so armored knights, all of whom were sitting on horseback with cold expressions. None of them had any hint of remorse or apology in their eyes. The accident had taken place at a T-intersection close to the Renhe Food Street, and the massive collision had attracted the attention of many of the passers-by on the streets. All of them looked at the crests on the two carriages as they began to discuss quietly among themselves. "Isn't that a black berserker rhinoceros carriage from the first prince's manor? The horse-drawn carriage it crashed into isn't from the second prince's manor, is it?" "I think it is. The first prince crashed into the second prince's carriage, and even the coach driver was knocked out. This is massive news. The king's birthday is coming up tomorrow. These two princes won't get into a fight before that, will they?" The horse-drawn carriage shuddered violently as Amy raised her head from Irina's chest with a confused look. "Hey? Did we crash into something? You bastards! How dare you disrupt my bonding time with Amy?" Irina wore a frosty expression on her face. She was basking in the warmth of her daughter that she had been sorely missing for 4 years, only to be disrupted in such an infuriating manner. A general in a suit of black armor emerged from within the rhinoceros-drawn carriage. He made his way over to the horse-drawn carriage and apologized with not even the slightest hint of apology in his eyes. "My apologies, this black berserker rhino suddenly went on a rampage and crashed into your carriage. Was anyone hurt during the crash? That's not how you should be apologizing." A cold voice sounded from within the horse-drawn carriage in response. The curtain fluttered open, and a humanoid figure had appeared in front of the rhinoceros-drawn carriage, holding a chair in her hands. "She's so beautiful." The elf that had suddenly appeared in front of the rhinoceros made all of the passers-by's eyes light up. She had long flowing silver hair, and was like a celestial maiden who had descended from the heavens. Everyone found themselves completely unable to look away, and at the same time, they were quite curious why she had suddenly appeared here. In contrast, the knights behind the rhinoceros-drawn carriage were very alarmed by her astonishing speed. She had suddenly appeared in front of the black berserker rhinoceros, and they didn't even see how she had gotten there. Thump! A loud thud erupted as the chair in her hand exploded into countless shards of wood. The intimidating black berserker rhinoceros that was glowering at Mag a moment ago was forced to its knees after receiving an almighty blow to the head. Its horn, which was even harder than most metals, had been completely flattened by the chair, and as it fell to its knees before Irina, it was already dead. Its massive body tipped over to the side before crashing to the ground, almost causing the carriage that it was drawing to tip over along with it. All of the bystanders gulped involuntarily upon seeing this. Irina seemed incredibly frail in the face of that black berserker rhino, but she had taught everyone a vivid lesson on why they shouldn't judge a book by its cover. Even though the black berserker rhino was only a 4th-tier magic beast, its defensive prowess was renowned as comparable to a 5th-tier magic beast's. It would be difficult even for a 5th-tier knight to slay it with a proper weapon, let alone a wooden chair. If you can't keep your stupid beast in check, then I'll discipline it for you. Irina looked at the knights behind the carriage with a cold expression as she threatened, "Don't go releasing things that you can't tame. Otherwise, I'll kill all of them. How dare you?" A knight drew his long sword as he prepared to rush forward and capture this insolent elf. "Are you crazy? That's the elven princess." One of his comrades hurriedly grabbed him by the collar, almost wrenching him off his horse in the process. "The elven princess," the knight exclaimed in a trembling voice, and he fell straight off his horse in fear. There was once a list of people who were not to be messed with circulating throughout the Roth Empire's army, and Princess Irina stood at the top of that list. This legendary princess was once Alex's companion, and had always been regarded as the frontrunner to become Alex's wife. Of course, that wasn't the reason why she was not to be messed with. Instead, the reason for this was that everyone who had gotten on her wrong side had suffered terrible fates. In fact, the black berserker rhino was fortunate to have died such a quick and painless death. All of the knights were rooted to the spot with wary expressions on their faces, and the general who had just offered an apology also wore an uneasy look on his face. Who would have thought that the elven princess would just so happen to be sitting in this carriage from the second prince's manor? The entire scene descended into a deathly silence. All of a sudden, Amy broke this silence as she clapped her little hands together with a reverent expression on her little face. "Wow! Big sister Irina is so cool." At this moment, the curtain on the rhinoceros-drawn carriage was swept aside, and a tall and broad man emerged from within. He turned to Irina, and said, "You're completely right, Princess Irina. If you encounter any more of my rampant pets in the future, please do me the favor of killing them on the spot. One, probably 2 on one side, for the total of 4 wheels." The man who had just emerged from the carriage was clad in a golden armor that shimmered under the sun. His angular features appeared to have been carved from stone, and one of his hands was resting on the hilt of his sword. His entire body was exuding a sense of power and prestige, and he was looking at Irina with a calm expression, seemingly in agreement with her criticism. "It really is him." Mag's eyes narrowed slightly, but he quickly schooled his expression. This was the first prince Mag had once referred to as his comrade, yet he was also one of the masterminds behind the assassination 3 years ago. Everyone had thought that Alex and the first prince were close friend and comrades, so he would definitely stand with the first prince against the second prince in the battle for the throne. However, that was all in the past. As Sean rose up the ranks and began to tear through his own facade, revealing the swelling ambitions within his heart, the two of them diverged onto different paths. "It's the first prince." All of the passers-by bowed toward Sean as a gesture of respect. Ever since Alex had passed away, Sean had won many accolades during battles that had taken place on the border, and he gradually replaced Alex as the guardian deity of the Roth Empire. In the past, his reputation in the heart of the general public was far inferior compared to Josh's. However, he had won over the hearts of many people during the past 2 or 3 years, and his reputation was now at least comparable with Josh's. He was undoubtedly one of the beneficiaries of Alex's death. Sean nodded to acknowledge the passers-by. Even though he was exuding a rather intimidating aura, he didn't seem all that cold nor distant. Looks like he's doing everything he can to inherit the throne, he's even learning to win over the general public like a wily old politician, Mag scoffed internally. He couldn't be bothered to participate in the battle for the throne. Politics was far too complicated, cooking was much more fun. However, he disliked both of the candidates who were in line to inherit the throne, as it wouldn't be good news for him regardless of which one became the king. As such, he was feeling quite conflicted. Furthermore, it was quite bothersome for Mag that Irina had rushed out and killed this black berserker rhino in such a spectacular fashion. He had thought that she would keep a low profile and attempt to be more inconspicuous, but it now appeared that the word inconspicuous didn't even exist in her dictionary. Their family of 3 had just reunited, and they were on the same horse-drawn carriage. It would be far too optimistic to hope that Sean wouldn't suspect anything after seeing this. Irina looked at Sean with a smile as she said, "I always prefer to beat the rampant pet along with the owner. Like owner, like pet, anyone who would release such an unruly creature has to be an uncouth ruffian themselves. I hope you can discipline your pets from now on. Otherwise, I won't be holding back next time. I'll be sure to keep all of my pets on a tight leash after I return to my manor." Sean's expression remained calm as he turned to Mag with a smile, and said, "It's quite a surprise to me that Princess Irina had already arrived in Rodu and is sitting on a horse-drawn carriage from the second prince's manor. Who might this be? Are you a guest of Princess Irina's?" Sean's eyes narrowed slightly as he examined Mag. He had just received news the day before that Josh had found a chef by the name of Mag, and was preparing to get this chef to cook for the king during this birthday banquet. Furthermore, this chef had a half-elf daughter who was around 3 to 4 years old. Furthermore, the latest news from the cheetahs informed him that Bertley, who had followed Lewis to Chaos City, had disappeared due to reasons that were unknown thus far. This string of events was far too suspicious to be a coincidence, which was why he had intentionally instructed the coach driver to crash into this carriage. He was hoping that this Mag would be sitting on the carriage so he would be able to see him in person. However, much to his surprise, Irina was also sitting on the same carriage. He was a chef by the name of Mag who had a little half-elf daughter, and was traveling with Irina on the same horse-drawn carriage only a day after he had arrived in Rodu. Was this all a coincidence? Surely it was too much of a coincidence. Sean didn't believe for a single second that so many coincidences would befall a single person. Mag's heart sank slightly as he took in Sean's expression. He had only just passed Josh's test, yet Sean had popped up to administer another stern examination. It would be very difficult to erase Sean's suspicions toward him now. Right at this moment, Krasu emerged from the carriage and looked up at Sean with a smile as he asked, "Do I count as a guest as well, Sean?" Krasu. Sean's pupils contracted drastically upon seeing this. He was already quite stunned to find Irina on this carriage, and his surprise had been compounded even further by the emergence of Krasu. However, Sean quickly recomposed himself as he smiled, and replied, "Greetings, Master Krasu. You're naturally a guest as well, and quite an esteemed one at that. I heard that you had settled permanently in Chaos City. It's quite a surprise to see you here in Rodu. Who's this Master Krasu? Why is even the first prince being so respectful to him? You don't even know who Master Krasu is? And you call yourself a citizen of the Roth Empire? You should be ashamed of yourself. 50 years ago, Master Krasu was just as renowned as Master Alex was. Back then, even giant dragons had to adopt their human forms before entering through the city gates of Rodu. Otherwise, it was quite possible that they would be swatted down from the sky by a vicious staff to the head. Even the current Magus Tower was founded by Master Krasu. Without him, the Holy Land for all magic casters wouldn't even exist. All of the bystanders began to discuss spiritedly among themselves. Many of them wore excited expressions as they recounted Krasu's legendary feats, and they looked as if they wanted nothing better than to express their awe and admiration for Krasu in person. Krasu pursed his lips, and said, "I'm not a tree, I can go wherever I please. You're not the king yet, but you're already preparing to dictate terms on where I can and can't go." Sean's expression became even more cautious. Krasu held an extremely special status in the Roth Empire, one that was not inferior to that of Alex in his prime. The fact that he had left Rodu and cut all ties with the Magus Tower was undoubtedly fantastic news for Sean, as it meant that Josh had lost an extremely powerful ally. However, he had just emerged from Josh's horse-drawn carriage, and he was clearly quite displeased. If he were to side with Josh again, that would spell disaster for Sean. With that in mind, Sean hurriedly offered a smile as he replied, "I wouldn't dare to dream of it, Master Krasu. You can go wherever you like on the Norland continent." Krasu looked at Sean with a smile as he said, "In that case, it shouldn't be an issue to you that I'm taking my prized disciple out for some food and having a chat for old time's sake with little Irina, right? Why are you trying to ram me to death with this big magic beast?" Sean glanced at Mag and Amy before hurriedly shaking his head as he said, "This is all a misunderstanding, Master Krasu. I'll be sure to hand down a severe punishment to this coach driver when I get back to my manor. I'll come to visit you in person with a formal apology on another day, but I have important matters to attend to today, so I'll be taking my leave now." Sean fled the scene in a panicked manner, and Mag carried the unconscious coach driver back onto the carriage before continuing to drive the barely functioning horse-drawn carriage toward the food street. "Looks like I've already aroused Sean's suspicions. I'll have to prove to him tomorrow on the king's birthday banquet that I'm not Alex," Mag thought to himself with a heavy heart. Sean wasn't as rough around the edges as his appearance suggested. If he had suspicions toward Mag, then he would continue to keep an eye on him. The assassin that had been following Lewis verified the notion that he had never given on his search for Alex, and he wanted Alex dead just as much as Josh did. If Alex wasn't dead, then all of his efforts for the past 3 years would go to waste. All of the respect and admiration he received from the public would be transferred back to Alex. There could only be one war god, and it had to be the most powerful person in the entire empire. "Big Sister Irina, you're so cool. You beat up such a big beast so easily." Amy looked up at Irina with admiration in her eyes. Irina was thoroughly enjoying the admiration that she was receiving from Amy. It was a unique experience to be admired by one's own daughter. A smug expression appeared on her face as she waved a nonchalant hand, and said, "It was nothing, don't mention it." Krasu chuckled as he stroked his beard. "You don't have to admire her, little Amy. Little Irina learned melee magic from me for a while. She's not officially a disciple of mine, but you can call her your senior apprentice sister if you like. It's just that she didn't manage to learn any of my truly powerful magic. Once you grow up, you're going to be even more powerful than she is. I knew you were hiding things from me, old man Whitebeard. You told me that you'd taught me everything you knew, but I knew you had more powerful magic up your sleeve." Irina turned to Krasu with her brows furrowed in an accusatory expression. Krasu merely shrugged, and replied, "Of course I'd be saving my best magic for my disciple. Plus, you can't blame me for this, little Irina. I taught you everything I could despite the objections from the elven race. At the time, you simply weren't powerful enough to learn my best magic." Amy's eyes immediately lit up upon hearing this. "So Big Sister Irina is my senior apprentice sister as well? That's awesome. I'd love to be as strong as Big Sister Irina someday. Don't worry, you might not become more powerful than I am, but you'll definitely be more powerful than the vast majority of people. After all, you're my," Irina paused momentarily before continuing, "apprentice sister." Mag wore a faint smile on his face as he listened to the conversation taking place within the horse-drawn carriage. For some reason, he was very pleased to hear the interaction between Amy and Irina. The horse-drawn carriage emblazoned with the crest of the second prince's manor was too ostentatious, so Mag decided to park it in an alleyway outside the Renhe food street. The food street is too crowded, so we'll park the horse-drawn carriage and walk over there, Mag explained with a smile. I want father to hug me and raise me up high. Amy was the first one to run out of the carriage, and she pouted adorably as she raised her hands up into the air. That's my man. Irina raised her eyebrows as she turned to Mag before narrowing her eyes. You dare to hug other women? All right, here we go. Mag chuckled as he picked Amy up from the ground, raising her over his head before bringing her down again, repeating this process over and over again. Ah! It's so high up. This is so fun. Amy squealed with delight as her face lit up with a joyful smile. After raising her up about 5 or 6 times, Mag held Amy in his arms and planted a kiss on her forehead with a doting smile on his face. Not only did he hug her, he even kissed her. Irina's eyes widened with fury. However, all of her rage was dispelled as she turned her gaze toward Amy. Perhaps hugging and kissing their daughter wasn't a crime punishable by death, after all. But why are they so close with each other? Irina looked at the joyful Mag and Amy, and a hint of jealousy welled up in her heart. She felt as if Mag hadn't even taken a proper look at her this entire time, and that he only had eyes for Amy. Why do you look so sad, big sister Irina? Do you also want father to hug you and raise you up high? Amy turned to Irina with a concerned expression. She then patted Mag's shoulder as she whispered into his ear, Father, here's your chance. Irina almost blurted out the words I do, but Mag was appraising her with a calm expression as if he were looking at a stranger, and that was very disheartening as well as a little infuriating to her. As such, she gritted her teeth, and said, I'll pass. She then disembarked from the carriage on her own. Mag was rendered quite speechless by Amy's latest attempt to bring him and Irina closer. She harbored good intentions, but her methods were lackluster to say the least. You can go have some food first. I'm going to see an old friend first, then come to find you later, Krasus said with a smile before also disembarking from the carriage. There was no one else in the alleyway, and Mag looked at Irina while she looked back at him. The two of them stared at each other in silence, and the atmosphere became rather awkward. After a short while, Amy quietly asked, Are you two having a staring contest? Irina took Amy from Mag's arms, then pointed at Ugly Duckling, which was crying out feebly from the edge of the carriage, and commanded, I'll hold Amy, you hold that cat. All right. Mag could only do as he was told upon seeing Irina's implacable expression. How could he deny a mother who simply wanted to hold her child? Besides, he couldn't stop her even if he wanted to, the two of them weren't even in the same weight class. He was like that black berserker rhino from earlier, completely at Irina's mercy. As such, after a brief period of contemplation, Mag obediently picked up Ugly Duckling. Regardless of when two of them actually learned each other's identities, it was clearly a good thing for Amy and Irina to form a stronger bond. It was just that he didn't want Alex's relationship with Irina for now. Marrying a beautiful and powerful woman and basking in the resentment, jealousy, and hatred of all men in this world sounded amazing in theory. However, the reality was that he would most likely have Ugly Duckling thrust into his arms while Irina and Amy rode off into the sunset, completely leaving him behind. That would be far too inhumane. Even if he couldn't set up a harem in this alternate world, he had to at least ensure that he wasn't dominated by a single wife. I have to return to my former power as quickly as possible. Mag vowed in his heart. All of a sudden, Irina turned around, and said, You seem to be quite displeased with me. How did you know? Mag blurted out. Amy was looking Mag with a rather urgent expression. How could he have said something like that? What if Irina became displeased with him? Irina wore an amused smile on her face upon hearing Mag's response, but there was a dangerous glint in her eyes. Mag could sense a frosty aura surging toward him, and he was struck by the urge to slap himself across the face. How could he have allowed himself to fall into such an obvious trap? He forced a smile onto his face, and said, "What I meant was, I'm not displeased with you, princess. I'm naturally very honored that someone of your status would treat Amy so well. I'm simply displeased with myself. I have to trouble a princess like you to hold Amy for me while a man like me is carrying ugly duckling. Is that really the case?" Irina looked into Mag's eyes. "Of course." Mag nodded with a firm and resolute expression. "Alex never lied to me in the past. I feel like he's changed a little, but he shouldn't be lying to me." With that in mind, Irina withdrew her gaze, and continued onward with Amy in her arms as she said, "I'm hungry, let's go eat." Phew, Mag heaved a faint sigh of relief, feeling as if he had just dodged a bullet. "Go, father!" Amy mouthed at Mag silently as she clenched her little fist to cheer him on. Mag nodded as he composed himself before striding forward with Ugly Duckling in his arms. He had to uphold his image as a courageous father in Amy's heart, so he couldn't back down no matter what. After passing through an alleyway, the three of them were greeted by the sight of a wide and bustling street. There were 2- and 3-story tall Western-style buildings lining the entire streets, mostly grayish-yellow in color. All of them had round dome roofs, and consisted of clean and simplistic lines. There was a series of small stalls lining the street, and chefs from all over the continent were showing off their cooking skills. This was a very lively, crowded street. The aromas of all types of delicious foods could be detected in the air, making it feel as if one were wading through a river of delicious cuisine. This street is not inferior to the commercial food streets in modern times. Mag couldn't help but praise it internally as he looked at the dense crowd making their way along the street. However, there was a clear disparity between the customers who were visiting the small street-side stalls and the customers dining at the restaurants. The former wore rather simple and crude attire, suggesting that they were most likely normal citizens, while those who fell in the latter category were dressed in much more lavish attire, and used horse-drawn carriages as transportation devices rather than traveling on foot. The prices of the dishes at the restaurants dictated its targeted demographic, so Mag didn't think too much of this. After all, it would be a lot more expensive to enjoy a meal at Mamie restaurant compared to purchasing some food from a street vendor. However, this was the case throughout almost the entire street, and there were even restaurants with bold signs prohibiting the entry of normal citizens. That observation brought a frown to Mag's face. The Roth Empire's political system was similar to that of medieval England. However, the king of the Roth Empire had established a centralization policy after founding the empire, giving the nobles usage rights over their territory, but not ownership rights. This was a system that was similar to the one employed by China during the Sui and Tang dynasties. In doing so, the king held absolute power over the entire empire, and could ensure that his policies and orders were carried out to perfection. However, there was also a major flaw to this system. Even though nobles didn't have ownership rights over their territories, they were still upper-class citizens of the empire, thereby possessing many special privileges that completely set them apart from commoners. The bold signs on those restaurants prohibiting the entry of common citizens were only the smallest tip of the iceberg. In the eyes of the nobles, common citizens were inferior beings whom they could do with as they pleased. I should rip off those signs and ram them in the faces of the owners of those restaurants. Mag looked at one such sign that was plastered in front of a restaurant by the name of Carey's Rotisserie, and he unconsciously clenched his fists. Compared to this city, he much preferred Chaos City. At the very least, there was hope for equality there one day. "What should we eat?" Irina asked in an offhand manner. "I think," Mag withdrew his gaze as he began to look around with a contemplative expression. "Let's go to this rotisserie." Irina strode over to Carey's Rotisserie with Amy in her arms. Mag looked on with a rather speechless expression. It turned out that she had only been asking a rhetorical question. He hurriedly followed along behind her, but he pointed at the sign on the door of the rotisserie as he shrugged, and said, "I'm just a normal citizen, not a noble. I really hate this differentiation, but as long as you're with me, I'll make sure that you're treated like nobility," Irina replied confidently. Is this what it feels like to be a sugar baby? Mag's eyes widened. He repressed the urge to go along with Irina's arrangements as he shook his head, and said, I have no intention of becoming nobility. The prices I charge at my restaurant are most likely higher than the ones being charged by this rotisserie, but I've never set any restrictions on who can dine at my restaurant. Rib. After looking at Mag for a while, Irina tore the sign of the door and tossed it aside. How about now? I'm feeling a little too flattered. Mag looked at the sign on the ground, then at the calm expression on Irina's face, and he was temporarily at a loss for words. Irina's actions naturally attracted a lot of attention from the passers-by on the streets. The beautiful and regal Irina was absolutely stunning, while the half-elf little girl in her arms was incredibly adorable. The two of them made the perfect duo, and the onlookers were simply unable to look away. Everyone then turned their attention to Mag, who was holding Ugly Duckling in his arms, and their expressions immediately darkened. What a lucky bastard! He's a man, yet he's holding a kitten, spineless pretty boy. Look at how gorgeous that little girl is. If it weren't for his beautiful wife, how could he possibly have such an adorable daughter? She's way out of his league. She must be as blind as she's beautiful. Mag was struck by an indescribable sense of satisfaction upon hearing those jealous words. These people were just like the pathetic keyboard warriors of the present generation, insulting celebrities and people who were more successful than them by typing up one jealous comment after another. The more these people resented him, the more satisfied he felt. He loved seeing them grit their teeth in fury, unable to do anything to him. Luck was not an attainable skill, so no matter how jealous they were, they could only concede that they weren't as lucky as him. Right at this moment, a brawny man holding a large meat cleaver rushed out of the restaurant as he roared, "Who dares to rip the sign off my rotisserie?" Carrie's rotisserie was quite renowned as the #1 rotisserie on the Renhe Food Street. It was said that the true owner of this restaurant was a high and mighty duke. Furthermore, the restaurant only granted entry to nobles, keeping out all normal citizens. Even so, they still received countless customers every day, all of whom were flocking to the rotisserie to taste their vastly renowned teppanyaki. Here in Rodu, there were nobles everywhere. As such, it was no wonder that Carrie's rotisserie had such a large customer base. Ike stood at the entrance of the restaurant with his meat cleaver in his hand, looking around from side to side with a menacing expression. As the head chef of Carrie's rotisserie, he regarded it to be a personal insult for someone to tear off the sign on their front door. However, he faltered slightly upon catching sight of Irina. This elf was simply far too beautiful, and judging by her airs, he could tell that she was definitely no ordinary elf. Ever since the conclusion of the war among species, the elven race and the human race had lived in harmony. There had never been any wars on their joint borders. In fact, the guard towers set up on those borders were simply there for show, with no actual soldiers stationed in those towers. Even though marriages between humans and elves were still frowned upon, such interspecies marriages did exist, even among the nobility of the Roth Empire. Of course, the most renowned of such relationships was naturally the one between General Alex and Princess Irina. Any man who can marry such a beautiful elf must be extremely powerful. With that in mind, Ike turned his attention to Mag. However, Mag was only wearing a simple black robe, and didn't appear to have an ounce of nobility about him. Ike's brows furrowed as he thought to himself, is this guy the coach driver? No matter how I look at it, there's no way that a man like him could father such an adorable child. Well, this is kind of awkward. Mag glanced at the sign down on the ground, and then up at the menacing Ike. There were so many bystanders around as well. If Irina were to reveal her identity, Mag could guarantee that a piece of news would spread the very next day, speculating about how Irina had had an extramarital affair and even birthed a child with another man. People always liked to hear stories about the legendary elven princess, so this piece of news would most likely spread like wildfire. If such rumors were to spread into the ears of his enemies, he would definitely arouse a lot of suspicion. Right at this moment, the system's voice suddenly sounded in Mag's mind. Ding! New impromptu mission, please set up a stall and make the most popular stall on this entire street within half a day. Reward for mission success, 1 stinky tofu recipe. Punishment for mission failure, 1 strength point will be deducted. What are you trying to do, system? Can't you see that I have enough on my plate already? And do you think it's easy to become the street vendor king here? Mag raised his eyebrows. He hadn't even thought of a way to resolve this situation, yet the system was burdening him with this random mission. He was actually quite fond of street-side food stalls. He had visited many street-side kebab stalls in his past life, and he found them to be quite inexpensive and enjoyable places to dine at as long as the ingredients used were clean and the flavor of the kebabs was satisfactory. However, it was very difficult to survive as a street-side vendor unless one had some tricks up their sleeves. This was the most lavish food street in the entirety of Rodu, and all of the stores here appeared to be doing quite well. The stall rental fees were most likely downright astronomical here, so a stall would close down in a matter of days unless they could generate a considerable amount of revenue every day. Mag didn't have a stall, nor did he have any kitchenware with him. The system was clearly trying to screw him over by releasing a mission like this. You're a candidate to become the god of cookery, how can you shoulder such a heavy burden if you can't even overcome such minor difficulties? You can do it. Embark on your journey to become the god of cookery by becoming the street vendor king here first, the system encouraged. Let me ask one more time, who tore off sign on my restaurant's door? Ike yelled in a loud voice, but his gaze had already settled on Mag. That guy's not planning to make that beautiful elf shoulder the blame, is he? All of the bystanders were looking at the dazed Mag with discontent in their hearts. Irina looked directly into Ike's eyes, and said, "It was me, I really think that the sign you put up is very insulting to common citizens like us. As a commoner and also a chef, I think that good food should only be bought using money, not using one's status." Mag cut off Irina as he took a whiff of the aroma wafting forth from Kari's rotisserie. His brows furrowed as he scoffed, "And you're proclaiming that your mediocre roast meat is fit only for nobles? Who gave you the audacity and confidence to say that?" Irina turned to Mag with a rather surprised expression. The Alex that she knew never spoke in this manner before. However, she quickly realized that he was only cutting her off so she wouldn't blurt out her own name. "So he's not a couple with that beautiful elf? I suddenly don't think he's all that bad now. I fully agree with what he said. Every time I walk past this rotisserie, I get the urge to rip off that stupid sign. I don't want to eat roast meat cooked by such a conceited snob. I didn't think that he'd be a chef as well. However, Kari's rotisserie is quite renowned in Rodu, yet this man is calling their roast meat mediocre. I wonder if he can cook anything better." All of the bystanders' impressions of Mag were suddenly completely flipped on their heads. They had thought that he was just a pretty boy hiding behind his beautiful wife, but he was standing up for himself, and the words that he had spoken garnered much support from all of the common citizens nearby. There was a roast meat street vendor beside Kari's rotisserie, and its heavily bearded owner, Sinclair, was looking at Mag with a pair of glowing eyes. He's right. This restaurant is constantly looking down on everyone, what gives them the right to do that? He had been renting this stall for about half a month to date, hoping to build a career for himself with his cooking skills. However, the roast meat that had won him much praise back in his hometown had drawn almost no customers here on the Renhe food street, and he was constantly being insulted and bullied by the head chef and employees of Kari's rotisserie. All of them were extremely haughty, thinking that they were high and mighty and beyond reproach just because the owner of their restaurant was a duke. Ike was enraged to the point of laughter as he pointed at Mag with his cleaver, and said, "You little bastard! How dare you speak like that about Kari's rotisserie? Even Duke Abraham has praised my roast meat, who the hell do you think you are? We'll let the customers decide whether your roast meat is good or not." Mag's expression was very calm as he turned his attention to the roast meat stall outside Kari's rotisserie. He turned to Sinclair with a smile, and asked, "Hi there, I'd like to borrow your stall for half a day in order to redefine the meaning of delicious cuisine on this food street. Would you be able to do me that favor?" "You're saying Kraso came to Rodu, and his disciple defeated Kola. Not only that, but Irina also appeared in the Magus Tower and assaulted Brent." Within a unicorn-drawn carriage that was slowly exiting the royal palace, Josh was looking at a magic caster sitting across from him with furrowed brows. The magic caster nodded respectfully, and replied, "Indeed, Your Highness. Those two events are perhaps unrelated, but the President is more concerned about whether Princess Irina is going to attack members of the Magus Tower again. If so, they'll be forced to retaliate." Josh's expression remained calm as he said, "I'll pay Irina a personal visit, so tell the President to rest assured. As for Krasu, if the President can set aside their bad blood and convince Krasu to stand with me, then that would naturally be fantastic news. His disciple is currently living at my manor, so I'll try to pull some strings behind the scenes. Please also issue an apology to the President on my behalf." "All right, I'll inform the President of this." The black-robed magic caster nodded before disembarking from the carriage. Following his departure, the carriage continued onward, and Josh furrowed his brows as he murmured to himself, was it merely a coincidence that both of them appeared there at the same time? It's also incredible that a 4-year-old little girl was able to defeat Kola. She's a freakish talent that may not even be seen once in 1,000 years. If Mag isn't Alex, then whose daughter could she be? Within the booth of a restaurant, Quine appeared beside Sean, and asked, "Your Highness, we've lost contact with the 2 cheetahs we deployed to follow them. Should we deploy more?" Sean shook his head, and replied, "There's no need for that. No one can spy on Krasu unless he allows them to. If we deploy more cheetahs to tail him, we'll only risk irking him, and who knows what that madman could do." Quine continued, "I just sent out some subordinates to go through the information we have on Krasu, and they informed me that Krasu took a 4-year-old half-elf girl as his disciple 2 months ago. The father of his disciple is the owner of a restaurant known as Mamie Restaurant. There's also been some news from the Magus Tower that Krasu visited the tower with his disciple, and she crushed Richard's disciple. Brent was also severely injured in a mysterious surprise attack in the Magus Tower at around the same time." Sean strode over to the window with a smile on his face as he said, "Sean is asking the father of Krasu's disciple to cook for His Highness during his birthday banquet, yet Krasu humiliated the Magus Tower with his disciple. If I'm not mistaken, the one who attacked Brent in the Magus Tower was most likely Irina. After that, Krasu and Irina were both riding on the same carriage from the second prince's manor. Does this mean that Josh is trying to teach the Magus Tower a lesson? Could it be that there's already a rift in the relationship between Josh and Magus Tower?" A surprised look appeared on Quine's face. Sean shook his head, and said, "If someone else did these things, then that would indeed be a possibility. However, there's no way that Krasu and Irina would allow themselves to be used by Josh. As such, I'm sure that all of this came as a surprise to Josh himself. Nonetheless, this is a good thing for us. If we can use the spies we have in the Magus Tower to sow the seed of doubt in Richard's heart by suggesting that Josh was behind all this, then the relationship between Josh and the Magus Tower will inevitably deteriorate. I'll organize that right away." Quine bowed respectfully before departing from the booth. Sean picked up the cup of wine on the table and downed its contents in one go before murmuring to himself, "Regardless of whether you're Alex or not, perhaps we've become comrades again on this occasion." In the face of Mag's request, Sinclair nodded almost without any hesitation. "Of course. You can use all of my ingredients and kitchenware, and there's no need for you to pay me any rent. All you have to do is pay me for the costs of the ingredients you use. If you need, I can give you a hand as well." It took 3 seconds for Sinclair to take off his apron and hand it over to Mag while also thrusting a boning knife into his hands. This stall owner was much more hospitable and eager to help than Mag had expected. As such, Mag smiled, and said, "Thank you. If possible, I'll require your help in taking payments. I'll pay you twice the average wage rate received by restaurant cashiers in this area. I'd be glad to be of service, sir, Sinclair replied with a smile before putting on an apron that had the word cashier stitched onto its front. Sinclair could sense the question in Mag's eyes, and he gave a slightly awkward smile as he explained, I thought that business for my stall would be really good, so I prepared a cashier apron, but I haven't even had a chance to use it yet. I'm glad you're well prepared. Mag nodded with a smile. This temporary employee was quite amusing. Ike looked at Mag with a derisive sneer as he said, What do you think you're going to prove with this rundown stall? No one with any amount of self-respect would eat anything from a roadside stall like yours. An inferior chef like you is only worthy to cook at roadside stalls for inferior citizens for the rest of your life. No one becomes nobler just from eating roast meat. Mag looked at Ike with a calm expression, and proposed, How about we make a bet? In half a day, we'll see if my roadside stall receives more customers, or your self-proclaimed noble rotisserie does. If you lose, then you can never plaster a discriminatory sign like this on your restaurant's door ever again, and if I lose, you can do with me as you please. You have yourself a deal. Ike was already brainstorming countless ways to punish Mag. His restaurant was the best rotisserie on the Renhe Food Street, catering to over 1,000 customers per day, yet this man was trying to challenge him with such a pitiful little roadside stall, it was an absolute joke. However, he had to accept this challenge in order to uphold the reputation of his rotisserie. Of course, he was even more eager to stomp this obnoxious man into the ground. Mag nodded, and said, All right, let's begin, then. You can get an employee of your restaurant to keep a tally of the number of customers visiting my stall, I'll do the same for your restaurant. I look forward to seeing you cry. Ike harumphed coldly before re-entering his rotisserie. A few moments later, an employee emerged from the rotisserie, looking at Mag and Sinclair with a derisive sneer on his face. Sinclair approached Mag, and whispered, Aren't you getting ahead of yourself here, sir? If you want to run away now, I can cover for you. We're going to be super busy soon, so I hope you're good with counting numbers. Mag patted Sinclair on the shoulder with a smile as he said, By the way, can you get me a pen and some paper? Sure, I just bought some for my daughter earlier today. Sinclair rummaged around in his little carriage before producing a stack of paper and a feather quill. Thank you. Mag accepted the paper, dipped the quill in some ink, and wrote a makeshift sign for himself, which he plastered onto the front of the trolley. Mamie Restaurant's temporary rotisserie stand in Rodu, selling roast beef for 1 silver coin per cube. He's trying to compete with Carey's rotisserie using a stall that barely gets any business? He must be dreaming. Could it be that he was hired by the owner of this stall to promote his failing business? You know what? That's actually kind of plausible. Otherwise, what kind of idiot would do something like this? I agree with what this guy said earlier, but he's completely out of his depth here. He's selling roast beef for 1 silver coin per cube? Since when was beef sold in cubes? Mamie Restaurant? Why have I never heard of this restaurant? Could it be that he was actually hired to promote that restaurant? All of the bystanders nearby were discussing quietly among themselves as they looked at Mag's makeshift sign. It was quite clear that no one was optimistic about his chances. Alex is going to sell roast beef? Will it be edible? Irina looked on with a skeptical expression as Mag sprang into action. Alex was even able to stomach her cooking, and he ate virtually everything aside from raw meat. However, he was now renting this stall and making a bet against such a successful rotisserie. Big sister Irina, father's setting up a stall. Let's be his first customers. Father's roast beef kebabs are super delicious. Amy's eyes lit up as he jumped down from Irina's arms. She then latched onto Irina's hand and dragged her over to the outdoor tables and chairs nearby. At the same time, she was amazed by her father's wisdom. If big sister Irina were to taste his food, there was no way that she wouldn't fall in love with him. I won't die from eating this, will I? Irina wore a skeptical look on her face. After all, Alex was even capable of eating the horrendous roast chickens she had cooked. Of course not. Amy shook her head with a firm expression. Father's cooking really is super delicious. All right, I trust you, so am I. Irina smiled as she patted Amy's head and took a seat beside her. Sinclair looked at the newly erected sign with a confused look as he asked, "Is this correct, Boss Mag? You're selling beef in cubes?" "That's right, a cube is about this big." Mag drew a circle with his index finger and thumb before continuing to tally up Sinclair's ingredients. There were 2 large slabs of normal ribeye beef which were relatively fresh. They appeared to have come from a freshly slaughtered cow from this morning, and they were sitting on a bed of ice cubes. A charcoal oven was being used along with a long rectangular roasting rack, beside which were beef steaks that were each sliced to around the size of a human hand. That was most likely the roast meat that Sinclair was selling. As for condiments, Mag only managed to find some salt. Seriously? He doesn't even have any oil? It's no wonder his business is so bad. Mag grumbled internally. He was using extremely lean ribeye beef as well, so the texture would be extremely coarse and hard without any oil. System, I'm not asking for anything else other than a bottle of cumin powder and a bottle of black pepper powder. Mag closed the condiments box with a speechless expression. You should try and complete this mission on your own. If you won't sell it to me, then I'll get Sinclair to go out and buy me some for twice the price, Mag interjected calmly. The system is more than happy to be of service. 1 bottle of cumin powder and 1 bottle of black pepper powder have already been delivered for twice the original price, the system immediately replied in a joyful voice. What? Did I agree to pay twice the normal price? Mag raised his eyebrows. I'll get Sinclair to go out and buy me some for twice the price. I'll get Sinclair to go out and buy me some for twice. A voice recording began to play on an infinite loop in Mag's mind. The system is happy to offer you the most exceptional service, the system said with an accompanying emoji of a fake professional smile. Fine. You win. Mag heaved an exasperated sigh. There was nothing he could do when the system was being so shameless. Are you sure you want cubes of this size? Sinclair was holding what he thought to be a downright tiny cube of beef in his hand with an incredulous look on his face. How could anyone possibly be willing to purchase such a minuscule bite-sized cube of beef for an entire silver coin? Sinclair himself was selling entire steaks for 20 copper coins. Mag turned to Sinclair, and replied, "That's right. If you have some time on your hands, would you be able to buy a barrel of top-grade vegetable seed oil and 10 handfuls of toothpicks for me?" Toothpicks? Are you worried that customers will get beef fibers stuck between their teeth? If so, you can rest assured, according to my experience, there are very few customers who will ask for toothpicks, so we have more than enough already. Sinclair shook his head with a smile. No, the toothpicks will be used to skewer meat. Mag turned to Sinclair with a serious expression, and said, "Time is ticking, Boss Sinclair. If you wish to be my employee for half a day, then I hope you can ask fewer questions. Otherwise, I'll choose someone more efficient instead." Mag suddenly really missed Yabimiya and Sally, who talked very little yet did lots of work. This Sinclair was indeed quite warm and hospitable, but he was too talkative, which made him a bad employee. Sinclair looked at Mag's serious expression and hesitated momentarily. Even though he still had a million more questions to ask, he refrained from doing so as he nodded, and said, "All right, I'll do as you say, Boss Mag." He then immediately rushed away to purchase the oil and toothpicks. The fact that he was renting this stall to Mag free of charge was already an admission that his business had failed. However, he wasn't willing to just give up without leaving behind some mementos. At the very least, he wanted to see Ike lose this bet before he left. As such, he simply had to trust that this Boss Mag was the real deal and support him in every way that he could. Mag pulled out the 2 bottles of condiments from the cabinet on Sinclair's cart. Mag no longer trusted the system to teleport things into his pockets anymore. Irina was still looking on from the sidelines, and he didn't want her to think that he was some kind of deranged pervert. Mag turned to Irina and Amy with a smile as he said, "Looks like we'll have to eat my roast meat for lunch today." "That's all right, I can eat father's roast meat 10,000 times without getting sick of it," Amy encouraged as she raised her little hands into the air. Irina looked at Mag with a serious expression, and said, "I hope I can still live to eat at the next restaurant." "I think you'll like it," Mag replied with a smile before turning back to the slabs of beef. It appeared that Alex's cooking skills were even worse than he had imagined. All of the beef was sliced into cubes with side lengths of 2 centimeters, and the 2 large slabs yielded over 1,000 cubes in total. Mag then placed all of the cubes of beef into a massive pot before purchasing some condiments to use as a marinade. Due to the limitations on time and ingredients, Mag wouldn't be able to cook roast beef of the same caliber as the kebabs sold at his restaurant, but 1 silver coin per cube was still a massive bargain. His target was to sell all of the cubes of beef he had in one afternoon. "Oh, I almost forgot." Mag suddenly slapped his forehead as he sheepishly wrote another short line of text on his makeshift sign. "Only 1 cube per person." Half an hour later, Mag was happily fooling around with Amy and Ugly Duckling, seemingly having already completely forgotten about the bet he'd made. Irina wore a serious expression as she examined Mag, who was drawing peals of joyful laughter from Amy. This man was completely different from the Alex in her memories. It felt as if there were countless secrets surrounding him, and she couldn't help but wonder just what could have happened to him in the past 3 years. How could he have changed so drastically during the 3 years they'd been apart? Most importantly, was his cooking really edible? A series of questions popped up in Irina's mind as she surveyed Mag with curiosity in her heart. In the past, Alex didn't know how to tell interesting stories, he didn't how to make faces to amuse their daughter, and he certainly didn't know how to cook. This was a very strange feeling. He was clearly one of the most important people in her life, yet she felt as if she were looking at a complete stranger. Getting to know him again was going to be quite an interesting experience. Mag wasn't in a hurry, but Sinclair was running around like a headless chicken. If it weren't for the fact that Mag had warned him not to ask any questions, he would definitely be asking him whether he was giving up on this bet already. Mag's cutting skills had greatly impressed him. To be able to dice large slabs of beef into over 1,000 cubes of identical size in such a short time really was an extraordinary skill. However, he was very perplexed by the sight of Mag drowning the beef in so many different condiments. How could roast beef be cooked with so many different condiments? Wouldn't that completely drown out the flavor of the beef itself? Furthermore, he was also very distressed by the sign that had been plastered onto the cart. Not only was he selling his roast beef in cubes, he had imposed a purchase limit of 1 cube per person. 1 cube wasn't even enough for a mouthful. Many of the bystanders had begun to leave. There were some curious customers who approached Mag to inquire about his sign, only to be politely turned away by Mag with the excuse that his stall wasn't open for business yet. Who would stay in the middle of such a busy street just to wait for a single cube of beef? The only subjects that could attract the attention of the passers-by on the streets were Amy and Irina. News of this bet had already spread through most of the stalls on the Renhe Food Street, but there wasn't much support for Mag. Instead, many vendors were afraid that Mag was just a troublemaker who would negatively affect their businesses. In the kitchen of Carey's rotisserie, Ike was listening to the report being delivered to him by his employee with a cold smile on his face. "You can play with your daughter all you want now, but I'll teach you a lesson to remember at close of business." Another fat chef in the kitchen held up a rolling pin, and chimed in, "Head chef, can I join you?" "Sure. Anyone who wants to come with me can beat that obnoxious bastard to your heart's content," Ike announced, drawing a chorus of cheers from the other chefs in the kitchen. Meanwhile, Sinclair was feeling very flustered outside, and as his eyes darted around in his urgency, he suddenly caught sight of the watch on Mag's wrist. He was very surprised to see that Mag was able to afford such a small and intricate magic clock, and his eyes lit up as he inquired, "Boss Mag, can you tell me the time? It's about to hit 12 p.m. soon. The meat has been marinating for about half an hour, and that should be enough time already." Mag glanced at his watch before making his way over to the stall while repressing the amusement in his heart. It was quite clear that Sinclair wasn't actually asking for the time, but was instead euphemistically reminding Mag to get to work. Half an hour wasn't enough time to marinate the beef, but it would be too late to start if he delayed any longer. "Go, Boss Mag, I believe in you." Sinclair raised his fists like a cheerleader as he offered words of encouragement. "Boss Sinclair, please don't ever do that again." Mag shook his head with a slightly disgusted expression. "Go, Father, I believe in you." Amy cheered in her mellow voice as she raised her fist into the air. "See? That's how it's done." Mag turned to Amy with a warm smile. As expected, Amy was much more suited to cheer him on. "Everyone picks beautiful looks over my beautiful soul." Sinclair sighed with a hurt expression. "Beautiful looks are pleasant to behold, while your beautiful soul sits in the body of a heavily bearded man. It's not a difficult choice to pick one over the other," Mag said in a calm voice as he added some coal into the charcoal oven. "Boss Mag, you're so cruel." Sinclair pouted as he clasped a hand over his heart. "Please don't ever do that again, either." Sinclair put on a serious expression as he said, "I'm entrusting my stall to you, I hope you won't disappoint me. You're running a failing business, so you really should be thanking me for repurchasing your beef and paying you twice the wage rate for being a cashier for today," Mag retorted with a shrug. "Boss Mag, please stop putting on these weird expressions, and please stop talking to me." Mag was suddenly struck by the feeling that Sinclair should have pursued a career in acting rather than selling roast meat. "All right." Sinclair immediately adopted a blank facade as he stood beside his cart. After silencing Sinclair, Mag was finally able to focus his attention on cooking. He placed a hand over the charcoal oven to test the temperature before placing cubes of beef onto the roasting rack. The cubes of beef immediately began to emit a sizzling sound as soon as they came into contact with the scorching roasting rack. Mag applied a layer of oil to the cubes of beef using a brush held in his left hand, and its aroma soon began to waft through the air. Is he finally making a start? Look at those tiny cubes, he's selling them for 1 silver coin per cube? Why doesn't he just go rob a bank if he's so desperate for money? I've seen beef cooked in slabs, steaks, and even whole calves roasted at once, but I've never seen beef sold in cubes. Most importantly, he's only selling 1 cube per person. The roast beef from Carey's rotisserie is truly delicious, and their restaurant is constantly being frequented by nobles. Even dukes are not an uncommon sight in their rotisserie. How is a roadside stall going to compete? All of the bystanders and stall owners nearby immediately burst into spirited discussions. Can you really cook delicious roast beef like this? Sinclair was looking at Mag with a skeptical expression. He wanted to raise that question on multiple occasions, but he suppressed the urge to do so. In any case, no one was a fan of the roast beef that he made, so he had no right to express doubts about Mag's cooking. Make sure to draw line per customer, I'll be watching. Mag handed over a stack of paper and a pen to the employee from Carey's rotisserie, who was on the verge of falling asleep. Is there any need for that? It's not like you'll be getting any customers anyway, the employee scoffed with a derisive sneer. Mag slapped the stack of paper directly into his face as he smiled, and said, "Make sure you don't miscount. You." The employee had been completely slapped awake, and he was glowering at Mag with a furious expression as he held a hand to his cheek. Even though he's changed quite a bit, his personality appears to be much the same. Irina slowly put down the chair in her hands. "This is a bet between me and your boss, so you'd better do as you're told." Mag pursed his lips as he picked up his bottles of cumin powder and black pepper powder. "I was saving your life there, you idiot." If that chair had landed on your head, you'd end up as dead as that black berserker rhino from earlier today. I'll return that slap with interest when you lose. The employee gritted his teeth as he clenched his hands tightly around the pen and paper Mag had thrust at him. The aroma of the sizzling beef on the roasting rack was really beginning to spread now. The cumin and black pepper powders were like the perfect catalysts, elevating the aroma of the beef to the next level. All of a sudden, an aroma that had been merely pleasant a moment ago suddenly became downright irresistible. What's that smell? Everyone around the roast beef stall turned their attention toward Mag almost at the exact same time.